I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It says the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. I've worked for a lot of the major companies over the course of that career and worked on a lot of interesting things that some people have heard of. I thought for tonight we'd focus on characters instead of some of the other stuff. And I was just thinking back, it's like, yeah, I've worked on Green Arrow, I've worked on Suicide Squad, Superboy, Batman, and a lot of other fun stuff. You can see more of that, learn more about me, obviously at my website, which also kind of serves kind of as the unofficial and hopefully eventually official hub actually for the Retro Rogues Live. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell some of the people hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you've worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. Bass God like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of Retro Rogues Live. I'm also the chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions, which is a small production house out in Arizona. And I am the associate producer of the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently available for free on Tubi. And I do want to acknowledge Joss there. He said, hey guys, good to have you back, Dave, and it's good to be back. So glad to see the Rogues Gallery already chiming in.
Very cool, very cool. And just a reminder, packages will be going out in the mail very soon. I've had some personal issues and obviously some little health things going on. Nothing too serious. Everyone relax. It's, for example, I finally got the crown for my emergency root canal I've had over the course of the pandemic, which I say if you have the chance, don't bother. But anyhow, enough about that. It's nice to be back. Packages hopefully going in the mail very soon. All right, so I think we're going to suspend the sketch card contest for tonight, just because I'm having a hard time, like I said, getting to the post office, and I'm getting too many things backed up, and I don't want to make any promises right now. But like I said, hopefully those will be going out probably just the next day or so.
One more shout out, Matt. My friend Matt is back from Portronics Film Productions. By the way, I do want to put out that we are actually involved right now in trying to do a film. So Portronics Film Productions, Matt, it's good to see you in the Rogues Gallery. And then Joss said, sorry, Eric, you weren't sick, so I didn't shout you out. No, that's fine. That's fine. No problem there.
Okay, so first thing off here, real quick, off the top, I want to update everyone on where we are with the digital magazine. Right now, we're a little hung up on production. It's on my end, again, because I've not been feeling too well. I'm running a little behind on things. So right now, the blame falls firmly on my shoulders. However, we do have something that I want to show off tonight, if Eric wouldn't mind sharing my screen. So this is just a small teaser image. I don't want to get too farther into this. This is one of the characters from one of the brand new original story that will be featured in the magazine. As it currently sits, I am writing and drawing this. And it's just kind of an idea that kind of sprung out of my head. This is sort of a bit of a fan production like the rest of the magazine. I can't show you the person this character is talking to because that would give too much away. But anyhow, this is a fan production. I think people will hopefully enjoy it. And this is just a little teaser of one of the other things you're going to be able to find in the digital magazine. And my hope is it's going to be available next week. I'm pretty much right at the finish line pulling it together. So hopefully it'll be next week and we'll be able to make an actual like firm announcement. I'm excited for everyone to see it.
I'm very excited to see it as well. You've been sending me updates constantly. And so I'm actually anticipating this quite a bit. It's nice to be a co-publisher in situations like this because I get to see all the material before it actually comes to the public. And I'm telling you, folks, it's going to be awesome. This is going to be incredibly high quality, and this is going to be free. It's going to be free. And again, Dave, is the sign up available on your website yet? As far as people signing up for the newsletter?
The sign up is on there, but unfortunately it's buried. So I'm gonna put that back to the top. I'll probably do that tonight after tonight's show. So tomorrow you should be able to find the sign up actually for the email newsletter, and that is going to be the way that we're going to be distributing the digital magazine. But at the same point too, this isn't a locked off thing. If you're one of the subscribers and you receive it and you like the digital magazine, it's just going to be a PDF. And if you want to forward that around for your friends for them to check it out, do it. That's what we're hoping. The whole goal here is to build a fun, supportive community for everyone. We can all come together and talk about the things that we like, maybe diss a little bit on the things that we aren't too keen on. But at the end of the day, respect everyone's opinion and just enjoy all of this fun genre entertainment, whether we're talking about movies or television or comics or video games. So that's hopefully the goal and the point of what we're trying to do here. But yeah, the sign up will be on there. I'm going to push it to the top of the page tonight after the show. So tomorrow, if you haven't signed up for it yet, you'll be able to sign up for it there. And then
that's a good reminder also to folks to remember to share our content. We don't do a lot of our own self-advertising on this show because, quite frankly, I'm one of the first people to say I get annoyed by it. But please do, if you like the content, please do share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with everyone, and let them know about Retro Rogues Live.
And I do see in the chat that we have some speculation on who this might be. James is suggesting is it Ares? I'm not going to answer that question because I'm going to want everyone to read the story and enjoy it for what it is. You're not off base necessarily, James, but I'm not going to say exactly who it is because it would kind of give too much away. Like, for example, there's actually a much more striking image I really wanted to show everyone. I'm really super proud of, but it would give way too much away about what we're doing. But no, I think people are going to enjoy this. So yeah, everybody just kind of hang tight. Like I said, we've got probably about another week, and then hopefully it'll be coming out then.
Very, very cool. Like I said, I think people are going to be very excited and very, very pleased with this. Is that right, Dave?
I'm sorry, you started to hang up there for just a minute.
We're officially calling it a fanzine, correct?
Yes, we are calling it the Retro Rogues Fanzine. If I keep referring to the digital magazine, it's just because I'm still stuck in what we're originally calling it. But yes, it is a fanzine. It is in a magazine type format because I felt like if we just took this stuff and then we just put it on our website, like our website or whatever, I mean, that'd be fine. But I don't feel like it really captures that feel because the goal is to create something that's reminiscent of Comic Scene magazine, which I used to talk about on the show all the time, or reminiscent of, for example, Wizard magazine or Starlog magazine, because that's what we're hoping to do. Is we're hoping to create something that kind of fills that niche for those of us that love this kind of genre entertainment.
And I will say, for me, growing up, I was a big fan of Starlog, but Starlog was a real treat for me. Like, I couldn't subscribe to it, and get it every month. I couldn't afford buying it every month. It was more expensive than your standard comic book. I think comic books when I started out as a kid were around 75 cents, and Starlog magazines were always more than that. So it was always a big treat for me to get a Starlog. In fact, I still have some old Starlogs in my collection, intermingled with some of my comics. So I think that's kind of exactly what we're going to be doing with the Retro Rogues Fanzine, is it's going to have very much of that same kind of feel. We're hoping that something you're really going to be looking forward to every quarter once we get a regular schedule going.
And also, too, the other thing that this is kind of sort of like in the vein of is if, back in the 80s when you were a kid, my grandmother got me several subscriptions to these they were sort of like, they weren't very in-depth or heavy page count publications, but they had one for G.I. Joe, the G.I. Joe magazine. They had the GoBots magazine. They had the Thundercats magazine. And I always enjoyed all those too. So that's why we're actually doing sequential story pages in there, is because I always loved those when I was a kid. There'd be, for example, like the Thundercats one would have all kinds of fun stuff. But the main thing you're there for is that 4-page Thundercats story, or the main thing you're there to check out. Like, was interesting because G.I. Joe actually was a text-based. It was like a prose-based story. It wasn't always an extension of, like, for example, the Marvel Comics series. But Thundercats and GoBots, for example, they were sequential stories. So, I that's my thought. I'm trying to create something that would live within kind of those spaces in my imagination. And we've got a lot of wonderful people who have come on board to help us put this together. We had Edward Harris on the show previously, who's writing some stuff and contributing to the magazine. We've got an artist feature. I don't want to talk about that just yet because I want people to just see it. So there's just a lot of fun things that are going to be going on in the magazine. So I just wanted to update everybody where we are and what's going on with it, because I know it's been a little bit more of a delay just with everything that's been going on. It's just kind of complicated things. But like I said, we're right there at the finish line. So the wait is almost over.
Very, very cool. And James says he remembers when they were still only 10 cents, like it's yesterday. 10-cent comics, huh?
Yeah,
that's before my time.
Well, along those lines here, real quick, since we're just doing some stuff here at the top, I wanted to share this. So those of you who've been following along have kind of heard about my Funko Pop obsession, and I've been kind of weighing my options on what I wanted to do. Well, I finally decided to pull a trigger, and I did actually get the classic X-Men. So this is actually them on the shelf in my studio. I was going to have them and hold them on the camera, but I think I might do that maybe next week, because I actually have a write-up actually talking about my fandom and the Funko Pop thing, and actually tying it back in actually to a comic book series that I loved as a kid. And it's actually not the X-Men comic, it's something else that's tied into the X-Men comics. So, but hopefully we'll be talking more about that next week. But I just want everyone to see, and I lined them up like this because Namor, they kind of pushed out as sort of being, the first mutant now. That's kind of how they look at Namor. Of course, Namor obviously is the Golden Age character of the bunch here. So we have the Golden Age Namor. We've got the Silver Age classic X-Men, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Angel, Beast, and Iceman. And on the end, another one of my favorite X-Men, which is Wolverine, but that's actually they call it the cat mask suit. That's the Hulk 181, original first appearance Wolverine as a Funko Pop. And then he's over there on the end, and he kind of represents the Bronze Age. So in my mind, I've got a bunch of trades back there in Essential Collections. It's all Marvel Comics stuff on the shelf right now. But we've got the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and the Bronze Age all on one shelf. So that's my thinking anyway.
James says, and Toro too?
Well, and it's like, yeah, I should. I've been debating because they actually did release a Human Torch first appearance Funko Pop, and I'm thinking about getting that one. But I'm also, the ones I'm really kind of thinking about is I'm really looking pretty heavy right now. They have a classic Ant-Man, like the silver helmet, not the movie version, but the original comic book version. And I think he'd be kind of fun to have on this shelf. Although, in all honesty, there's no room for him right now, unless I put him up there and then move Wolverine down to another shelf. But I have been thinking about that Human Torch. But the ones I've mostly been thinking about right now is the Ant-Man and actually Tron and Sark. They actually released Funko Pops for Tron and Sark. And so I keep putting those in the Amazon shopping cart and then taking them out and putting them in and taking them out. So I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. I don't like I'm not like a big shopper kind of person, and I'm a bit obsessive compulsive, so I have to be mindful about what I do. But like I said, I've been looking at these X-Men characters forever, and I just finally realized it's like, let's just do it. But there's a whole story in the magazine about my fandom with the X-Men and where it kind of started and everything. But you guys can hopefully be reading that very soon. But I just thought it'd be fun to kind of show them off and show you that they're here in the studio, they're on the shelf. So, but that's just kind of a quick fun thing there.
I have a little geek question there. Namor is also the Submariner, right? Or is that a different character?
No,
I know him as the Submariner. I would have said that's the Submariner over there in the corner.
Yes, that is the Submariner. That is Namor. Imperious Rex, of course, created by the late great Bill Everett, who's one of my comic art heroes. Trivia fact, weird trivia fact: the first comic book page I ever drew was in the third grade. The first sequential page I ever drew was in third grade, and it was actually a Namor story. And it was because at the time I had gone to our local library in the Memphis area, and I had checked out this. It was like I think it's like the Smithsonian History of Comics or something. But in there, they had a section all about some of the Golden Age heroes, and they actually had a small Namor story. And I just thought Namor was really cool. And I'd kind of been obsessed with it, and I was constantly carrying that book around with me. So in third grade, we were to do an art project that could be of our choosing. And then we were going to turn it in at the end of the week, and they wanted us to spend some time on it. And so the thing I drew at home on my own time is I drew a Namor story. And that was the first sequential comic page I ever drew. So I have a huge love and fascination for, Submariner or Namor. So
Very cool. Speaking of past history, hey, Jane. Jane says hi. So, hey, guys.
Yeah, hi, Mom. Very cool. All right. Do we want to go ahead and get into our first topic for tonight?
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
All right, very cool. I'm going to switch the graphic over here real quick. All right. So for tonight's show, we're going to start off talking about actually The Gifted. Eric and I kind of discussed doing a bunch of different things, and we thought we'd give The Gifted a shot. You can actually watch The Gifted right now actually on Hulu. We're going to be talking about episode 1. Read you the episode, just the synopsis here real quick that comes off of IMDb. It just says, in a world where mutated humans are treated with distrust and fear, an institute for mutants battles to achieve peaceful coexistence with humanity. Now, The Gifted, this is, of course, the original episode from 2017. Again, you can watch this streaming on Hulu. The Gifted is very much in the X-Men universe. I can't really tell if it's supposed to be the movie universe or the comic universe. It's a little nebulous. It primarily focuses on X-Men characters that you might be familiar with. For example, Polaris has a pretty large role in it, at least this first episode. And then what's her name? Blink actually shows up, although they don't really use their code names very much. But anyhow, I suggested this just because I thought it would be interesting, because we're looking for another show that would be kind of current and contemporary. And so we just thought we would give this one a shot. So tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of this first episode of The Gifted?
Well, I thought to back up a little bit because I did do some research about the issue we're talking about as far as the continuity problem or continuity thing with this. Apparently, the idea of The Gifted was that they wanted to do an X-Men TV show without the X-Men. So, and I don't know if that was for rights reasons or because they didn't want to have, kind of like I think maybe they wanted to do the opposite of what DC has done, where DC has like multiple versions of the same character in multiple formats. For instance, there's a Flash TV show on CW, and yet we have a Flash in the Justice League movie, and there's supposed to be a standalone Flash movie in that continuity, whereas the TV show has nothing to do with the continuity of the movie. And I think that was what they were struggling with when they were trying to make The Gifted. They were struggling with the fact that the movies were very popular and they didn't know how to reconcile continuity problems. But at the same time, by the time The Gifted came out, there were already all sorts of continuity problems within the X-Men film franchise. In fact, anybody who's seen Days of Future Past knows that in some ways, that movie was supposed to kind of fix some of those continuity errors. Spoiler alert, it did one of the best things in X-Men film franchise history, in my opinion, because it erased X-Men 3. So, which I thought was awesome because I hate X-Men 3. And so there were already continuity issues within the films themselves. So my understanding in the marketing of this film, which was kind of muddled and a lot of people didn't understand it, was that they were trying to kind of have it both ways. So they do say in the series itself that the X-Men have disappeared. So you can take it as, okay, the X-Men that you knew and loved in the Fox films, they've disappeared. This still has continuity with it. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that are going on where you're kind of like, well, this doesn't really seem to fit with the films. And they were kind of almost doing sort of a multiverse thing where they were kind of, because that was already kind of introduced anyway, because that's what was going on with the films. So I think that's kind of part of the confusion. And I think it was very confusing and off-putting to a lot of fans because they didn't really understand that. It took me a while to explain that. And quite frankly, a lot of you are probably still scratching your heads being like, what did he just say? So it is a little bit confusing where this fits in. And I will say personally, I like the MCU approach a lot better. I like the fact, for instance, that the Daredevil series on Netflix, at least originally, fell into the continuity of the greater MCU. And I like that approach. I like it more than I like the DC approach. And I consider myself a DC guy. And so I think for a lot of fans, myself included, that's what kind of makes The Gifted kind of weird, is you're not really sure where it's supposed to fit in. I think the best way you could look at this is sort of as a multiverse, as sort of like, I don't know, like there's even the producers have said that this is supposed to fall in somewhere in between the last X-Men film and Logan, because obviously in Logan, the mutant population has been decimated. So this is supposed to almost be like a precursor to Logan. That's my understanding, if you want to look at it that way. So it's a little bit confusing if you're a hardcore, Fox X-Men fan, if you really liked the movies, which I liked a lot of the movies. I don't like all of them. I didn't like a lot of the new cast, quite frankly, and I didn't like a lot of the directions that they were going in. Although I did like Days of Future Past, where the two casts met each other. So The Gifted falls somewhere else. And I think people know by now I'm a lore guy. I'm a continuity guy. So for me, I always appreciate when a series tries to be within the continuity and tries to at least have some references to the continuity. Like I said, they do reference the X-Men in this show, but I kind of would have liked to have had like a cameo by at least one of the primary X-Men film cast or something like that. Like maybe even if it was a flashback and we saw how they died or something along those lines. So that's probably one of my biggest problems with this show in the beginning of it, is that I kind of want it to fit better with what I've seen before. And this first episode to me seems more of the same. It seems like it's kind of something we've seen before. I think it's ironic that we're reviewing this after we reviewed Code 8. And Dave, you brought up the point that it's kind of like we've seen this story so many times in very many ways. The Code 8 story is very much like an X-Men story. And The Gifted, I think, still has that same kind of problem. And I kind of propose an idea of how you could kind of get over that problem, and The Gifted doesn't do that. So for me, that's kind of my initial impression, because it's not like I go into this, with open arms and I go into this unbiased. To me, I would like to have seen it have kind of more of a continuity with the X-Men films. What about you, Dave?
Well, I would have liked more of a tight continuity, because that was my initial impression. That's the thing I felt like it was sort of most lacking. But here's the crazy thing: listening to you describe what you had researched and learned about the show, because I had suggested this, but I didn't dig too far into the background of the show. But listening to you, I'm like going, well, they've already done this. Okay, so some people in the audience may remember a TV show called Mutant X. Now, Mutant X was on syndication. Well, here we got a comment from James. Oh, man, Q Jump franchise is a mess with the continuity again. Yes, he did. And ironically enough, we will be talking about John Delancey a little bit later this evening, which I was pleasantly surprised to realize we will. He shows up on something.
By the way, anyhow, I didn't remember that either, Dave. That'll be interesting to talk about, because I didn't remember that.
I totally forgot all about it. So yeah, no, they've done this before. There was a TV series in syndication called Mutant X. Some people might remember the show. The big person I remember being that was John Shea. John Shea actually played Lex Luthor in the Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher, Lois and Clark Superman television series, which I quite enjoyed back in the day. But yeah, from 2001, Mutant X. Mutant X was basically supposed to be an X-Men series, but they couldn't use the X-Men, so it was actually based off of X Factor. But they changed so much stuff in it. It wasn't X Factor. It wasn't X-Men. It was its own weird hybrid thing that seemed to kind of reference things, but didn't reference things, and never really kind of fit in, which I think is exactly what we're talking about here with The Gifted. Ironically enough, Mutant X ran a total of 3 seasons. The Gifted currently has 2 seasons available. I think the 3rd season may have been canceled with actually the Disney buyout, so maybe it was not originally intended to be canceled. But anyhow, it's just kind of funny. I just feel like this is history repeating itself with The Gifted. So my initial impressions of this are, it was okay. I didn't dislike it. The character I thought was the most interesting. Looks like I'm not sure how much of a role he's going to play because he actually wasn't in the show very much. So it's kind of surprised. But yeah, and it was a bit confusing. That was my initial impression. It was okay, and I found it kind of confusing. So yes, I think I'm going to be ready to actually start talking spoilers here in just a minute. So did you feel that way too, Eric? Was your initial impression kind of like mine? It was sort of like, no, it was okay.
That would probably be the easiest way to sum it up. It's like, it was okay. To put it in perspective, obviously we didn't have a show last week. Okay, so it's been 2 weeks since our last show. I still haven't watched the 2nd episode because I haven't felt any need to. I mean, what does that tell you? You know what I mean? So did you want to get into some spoilers and talk about some specifics?
Yeah, we can get into some spoilers. So we're going to be talking about spoilers now about the first episode of The Gifted. I think the basic gist of it is that there's we kind of follow 2 different groups, and then eventually they sort of come together, essentially. By the 2 different groups I'm talking about, we have kind of what remains of sort of like the West Coast Avengers branch of the X-Men, kind of, where they're sort of like trying to continue the X-Men's mission. It's not quite clear if they were directly connected to them. I mean, I think they were. I don't know. It doesn't quite make sense. But anyhow, so you have sort of like an offshoot rogue group of X-Men that's still around. And in this group, this is where you have Polaris, for example. I think Polaris is probably the mutant character I recognized the first and seemed to be the most kind of on point. The other characters, a lot of them, I couldn't recognize who they were half the time, except for Blink. I knew who Blink was, but Blink kind of shows up later. So the show just starts off with them in the midst of they're trying to help someone out, and Polaris, one of the characters gets shot by the police, and Polaris takes her anger out on this cop and almost kills this cop. And then this brings down the what were they called, Eric? They were like the Sentinel something. It's like the Sentinels, but it's human beings at first. So
yeah, it's like the Sentinel Agency or something like that. I don't remember the exact term, but although there are Sentinels as well, they have their own version of Sentinels as well. But initially we're introduced to these federal agents who I think are supposed to also be analogous to Homeland Security and things like that. And they are, like you said, they're human beings, and it's like the Sentinel Agency. I can't remember the exact term.
Yeah, and they kind of come across kind of like as the agents from the Matrix kind of idea. They show up and everyone's like, oh no. So anyhow, they show up to investigate this situation, and then the X-Men end up basically they save not the X-Men, this gifted group of satellite X-Men, I guess. They basically managed to escape, and now they're kind of like on the Sentinel Agency's radar or whatever. And then at the same time, we're kind of following this family, and amongst the family, there's this kid who something's happened with. they might have been more specific, but I don't remember exactly what the deal was. But the kid had done something previously, and he's kind of grounded on house arrest. He's not supposed to be leaving the house, but he goes with the sister to a high school dance. And then
the kid's being bullied. That's what the issue is with the kid. The kid's being bullied. He's been in some fights, and I think that's why they're telling him, hey, don't go out. They're trying to protect him.
So he's at the high school dance, the sister's there, and then the bullies see the one kid, and so they decide to try and bully him. And in the midst of all this, we discover that the son has mutant abilities that he doesn't quite understand how to control because they emerge for the first time. He almost destroys like the high school gym where the dance is going on. And then his sister actually comes to his aid, and then it turns out that his sister has mutant abilities, and she understands, at least in a nascent ability, she understands how to use her powers to a certain extent. And in the midst of all this, we also learned that their father actually works for a different group that's not the Sentinel Agency, but he's involved with arresting and prosecuting or something, actually mutants. So it's sort of like, the guy who's in charge of keeping the mutant population and situation under control on a more local level, not a federal level. Both of his children have mutant abilities, and he doesn't know about this. So this incident occurs. The kids go back home. The Sentinel Agency shows up to arrest the kids. The mother tries to intervene. Some chaos. The kids try to help them out and basically mark them where they're basically being pursued. So then it just turns into like a pursuit show where they're trying to catch them, kind of thing, and they're trying to stay one step ahead. The father knows how to actually contact the X-Men. He actually contacts this satellite group of X-Men, and they're like, hey, if you spring our person, we'll help your family out. So they kind of make a deal. And then they're at a parking garage structure when they decide to try and make the deal. And that's where we see the television show's version of the Sentinels, which is kind of like these weird spidery robot kind of guys. They're kind of interesting. I prefer the giant, more humanoid mech robot kind of idea. But so they have these little spidery, creatures that are robots that are trying to take them out, these versions of Sentinels. So, which again reminded me of more the Sentinels, the Squid Sentinels from the Matrix again. Keeps coming back to the Matrix for some reason. Anyhow, so the episode ends with some of them get away, and it looks like the father doesn't. And then the big thing is, are they going to be able to get everybody back together? And then, like I said, my initial, as far as the spoiler conversation goes, the one character, I can't remember his character's name, but he's the actor who actually used to be on True Blood. He was the one who I thought actually was going to have a much larger role actually in the show. He's in the show quite a bit, but he's not really, quote unquote, the star. And I thought he was the star. I thought he was sort of like Stephen Moy is his name. He plays Reed Strucker. And I had thought he was more of a like Magneto, Professor X kind of guy, and he was going to be the one kind of running the X-Men, but then it turns out he's just the father of these two kids. That's not the role that he's playing out at all. So it was just sort of not what I was expecting at all. It was kind of fun to see Blink actually, and Polaris for a little bit, even though they're kind of hard to see who they are at times. And then a lot of the other mutant characters, I think they're mostly new. So yeah, like I said, my whole thing with this show is it was okay. But I feel like I managed to pick another show that I think we're going to be like, I don't know if I want to watch any more of this. So tell me, Eric, now that we can talk spoilers, what was the thing that you liked the most about the show? Let's lead off with a positive.
The thing I liked the most. That's an interesting question there. I thought it was shot pretty well. I didn't think it had a cheesy TV factor, which is something you always have to worry about when you're doing something like this on television as opposed to doing it on film. So the production values were fairly strong to me. I thought the effects were decent. You know what I mean? Like they didn't look too cheesy to me. So I would say the production value is pretty high for a television show. That's probably the thing that impressed me the most with this series. Is it looked good? You know, it looked okay. I didn't have anything to nitpick about that. Where I was like, well, that looked really cheesy. That looked, you know, it's definitely not cinema quality. Don't get me wrong there. But it was shot very well, and the effects I thought were, you know, good enough for television. That's probably what I liked about it the most. But as you mentioned, the setup and everything is kind of something that we've seen a million times before, and I'm not sure that this series offered anything new.
That's probably a good way to sum it up. And that was the thing. Like I've said this. I think I said this in the last episode. It's like I don't mind if you give me a story that I've seen before, as long as you give me something interesting to hold on to. And that was the thing. Or you give me some characters I like. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel as long as it's
compelling characters.
Yeah.
Compelling characters is what you need, not archetypes and stereotypes. You need compelling characters.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like I could recognize who Polaris was, and I enjoyed seeing Polaris because I have a affinity for the character because I've read the comics. But the problem is for the rest of these characters in the show, I couldn't tell you who any of them are supposed to be. And I think that's part of the problem. It's like if the guy here, like at first I was thinking he was supposed to be Havoc, but as the show goes on, it's pretty clear it's not supposed to be Havoc. I'm not sure who he's supposed to be. But it's just sort of like, it's like, oh, well, that's not Havoc and Polaris. Okay. And then as it just kind of went on, it didn't have, I wasn't too terribly interested in what was going to happen to these characters moving forward, I guess is the problem. It's sort of like, you know, where they left it, I'm like, I'm good. You know, it's not a bad show. I mean, it's like Eric said, the production values are pretty high, and it's not like it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I mean, it was okay. But I think, unfortunately for me, there's just not enough X-Men goodness for me to stick around, you know, like if they were still at the X Mansion, for example, no, that'd probably bring me back for a second episode, you know? But it's just, they're so far removed from the X-Men. There's no outfits, there's no whatever, that, you know, there's not any low-hanging fruit for me to want to follow to another episode. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. One thing that I really question is there's a lot of underutilized X-Men that are actually very popular that have either appeared in only, say, one film, or they made like a cameo appearance in the films, and we've never really seen them in live action. And I'm like, why didn't you use some of them? And you don't have to necessarily go with the continuity if there's continuity issues, because they didn't want to sync the TV series with the films because the films were still being made at the time. I get those kind of production problems. Although, again, I'm more a fan of the MCU and even going into television and having continuity. But hey, if you can't do that, because hey, I say it all the time, continuity is the enemy of lazy writers. Okay, you want to phone it in a little bit? Fine. Well, if you want to phone it in, use an established character. Doesn't that make sense, Dave? If you want to phone it in a little bit, make it a little easier on yourself, use an established character that people already are aware of, people already like. For instance, Gambit. Gambit's been almost completely, I think he's been in one Wolverine film. Why not have him in this?
Wow, if that had been Gambit, if Gambit had been one of the lead characters, I would have totally watched at least 5 or 6 episodes of
exactly,
just for
exactly.
Gambit.
Just for Gambit. And then I don't want to mess up her name, but the character in the 90s X-Men's cartoon, the teenager who could fire like the little energy bolts.
Jubilee,
because I always mess up her name, and I don't want to mess up her name. Why not have Jubilee in this? Wouldn't she have been perfect in this? The 90s X-Men cartoon version of Jubilee? Wouldn't she have been perfect in The Gifted?
Yeah, I think well, there's a lot of really great characters that people have an affinity for that would have been fun to do in this show.
But Jubilee would have fit perfect in this story because it has the teenagers. Like, what if the sister was Jubilee? You know what I mean? What if the sister was Jubilee? Right. That would have been awesome.
Right. No, yeah, there's a lot of that's the thing. There's so much potential within the X-Men universe. That's the thing that I was kind of surprised at because I was thinking I would recognize more of these characters. Like when they started using their powers, like, oh, that's so and so. Oh, that's so and so. Like
No, they're
like
new
this
characters.
guy. I couldn't figure out who this guy like because I when I saw Polaris, I was like, well, that's obviously Polaris. So who is this guy? I still don't know who this guy's supposed to be. And for example, there's really great characters that they haven't even touched at all. Like when you talk about character like Sunspot, for example, from the New Mutants. An older, more mature version of Sunspot who maybe had run with the X-Men at one point, who fell out of favor because of the whole fallen angel storyline. Like you give him like a twisted backstory, and he's come back and he's with what remains of the X-Men, and they're trying to cobble this group together and figure out what happened to them. Because he's got some fun, superhuman based powers. He'd have like a cool effect that wouldn't be too expensive to do on a TV budget. Like Sunspot would have been great, and that's the problem. It's like, and that's what I think, because I think you've hit the nail on the head, Eric. I mean, because that's for me. Sometimes with this genre entertainment, that's all I need is just some easy, low-hanging fruit. And I go, oh, hey, that's so-and-so. That's cool. I'll watch it again. With
Right.
this, but I'm like going, I don't know who these people are. So I don't know if I need to follow this. So
And one role that seems to be totally absent, that seems obvious to me. And again, it's like, okay, you want to be lazy, you don't want to deal with continuity. Well, there are tricks. There are good tricks to use. For instance, why not there were so many cameos in the first X-Men film. And why not take one of those characters to tie it in, like one of those characters in those montage of scenes. I offer Jubilee as one example, but you could have taken like an X-Men from that era, and they could be like the leader. They could be like, or not even necessarily the leader, but the mentor of this group of young heroes. And there was no mentor role. They're all young. Nobody seems to know what happened to the X-Men, or at least they don't talk about it. But it would have been neat if they had just taken somebody to be sort of that Obi-Wan Kenobi role, and it could have been someone that tied in directly to the X-Men who was an X-Men. And then we don't know what happened to the X-Men because he doesn't like to talk about it, or she doesn't like to talk about it because it's too traumatizing. That seems obvious to me, and I don't understand why they didn't do that.
Or it could even be one of those things where, sometimes they do those psychic blocks, and for some reason the character can't remember what happened. Because since we're dealing with mutants and mutant abilities, someone could have blocked out of that one character's mind, the memory of what happened for whatever reason, whether and that's the thing too. And like I said, because we discussed this or Runaways, and now I'm like going, man, we should have just done Runaways. So kind of a bad choice on my part, but I honestly, I just remembered seeing some of the teasers for the show, and I thought, this might be fun. Let's give this a go. But after the first episode, I'm like, I'm good. So
I think one of the things we kind of agreeing on here is it's not like it's bad. It's just that you and I, being big genre fans, we've seen this so many times before. We're not seeing anything new, and we're not seeing anything that really brings us back, where it has that retro feel. We are the Retro Rogues after all. So we don't have anything that's bringing us back and saying, hey, that's like, that's their version of Wolverine, or, you know what I mean? Like that's their version of Cyclops or something like that. We're like, okay, that's cool. There just wasn't any of that. It was like they were trying to kind of, they were kind of trying to have their cake and eat it too, for lack of a better term. It was like they were trying to accomplish too much with too little, with a quote unquote fully original show that's still supposed to be part of the X-Men.
Yeah, and then actually, James just brought up who it is. He said it's actually Eclipse.
That's a character I'm not very familiar with, by the way. Actually, I'm not familiar with Eclipse at all. So, and he said Thunderbird was one of them as well. He says.
See, I thought I recognized Thunderbird, but they just didn't do enough with him. I mean, he should have. See, in my mind, Thunderbird would have been great to lead this show. That's a great X-Men that they haven't done a lot with. That's a lot of fun. I would have been totally down with him actually just leading the show.
James
I
did
like
say
Thunderbird.
earlier that he stopped watching the series first season, like episode 6 is when he jumped it and stopped watching.
Yeah. See, Eclipse is not a character I'm too terribly familiar with either. But Thunderbird would have worked. You know, I would have stuck around for Thunderbird. And that's a great character that they've hardly done anything with. He's got a really interesting backstory that for those of us that are living out here in the Southwest, that would be really kind of fun to have Thunderbird lead the show. So I would have been totally down for Thunderbird. Hell, I used to love Bravestar. Why not? Let's have a Native American lead a show. Let's do it. I'm down. So, and again, that's the thing. That would have been fun. I would have loved that. So I would have watched episode 2 right there, James. You would have fixed it for me. So that's because like I said, I thought one of them was Thunderbird, but I wasn't sure. So, well, I guess that's kind of our thing. And again, like you said, it's not a bad show. I'm not saying it's a bad show at all. It's just for me, there's not enough there for me to want to check out episode 2, unfortunately. And it's, you know, and like, for example, as much as I love Batman, I had a hard time with Gotham for the same reason. And that has a lot of a lot more easier to see low-hanging fruit for me as a Batman fan. But it's just one of those things. Anytime they try to do that X-Men without the X-Men, X-Men show without the X-Men, a Batman show without Batman, a Superman show without Superman. You know, Krypton was the same thing. I gave Krypton a shot. I think Krypton was a little bit more fun than The Gifted, but Krypton was another one of those things. Like, I tried to watch Krypton and it was kind of interesting. But it for me, it sometimes those kind of shows bring up too many questions. It's like, well, wait a minute. If that's happening, then what about that other thing that's supposed to happen? How is this? There you go. Well, thanks. I'm glad you're there for me. Like I said, that's like Thunderbird, man. Like if Thunderbird had been leading this show, and honestly, again, like Sunspot would have been fun. I think any one of those, just a X-Men character we're a little bit more familiar with in a lead role, because I'm not too familiar with Eclipse. Like I said, the characters I recognized immediately was Blink. Blink is really easy to see. It's Blink, and I enjoyed seeing Blink. And then, like I said, I saw Polaris right off the bat, and I really enjoyed seeing Polaris. But I just think we needed some, again, like those characters, for those of us that are long-term X-Men fans, just some more obvious powers so we know who they're supposed to be. Oh, that's so-and-so. Oh, that's so-and-so. Oh, that's cool. You know,
and then I would say you need to even go beyond obvious powers. You need to name them. And you need to maybe even have something in their costuming and stuff like that where you're kind of brought back to it. That's one thing that I think Fox lacked a lot of, that courage for whatever reason to actually make X-Men look like X-Men, because they made the argument, oh, that's going to be cheesy. Nobody wants that. And then look at the MCU. They all look like the comics and everybody loves it. So, you know, I think that they were trying to follow that Fox model. So I don't know. But Bobby is in the chat. He said, hello, gents. I agree. Tossing in a few unused X-Men could have kept me coming back for this show. So I assume Bobby saw it as well and was a little underwhelmed.
Yeah, and then we've got another comment here actually from James. He says that Eclipse is similar to Sunspot, but made for this universe. And I guess that's why I thought of Sunspot, because that's who I kept hoping this was. I mean, if this had been Sunspot, I think I'd been a little bit more willing to roll with what's going on. But then, like I said, I like the idea of giving him the Fallen Angels storyline, and he was estranged from the X-Men, so that's why he wasn't with them or more in contact. It would explain why he didn't know exactly what happened with the X-Men, and he was maybe on the outs a little bit with them at the time. And then him kind of regrouping, and then the other characters kind of knowing who he was and being familiar with him. But, you know, I don't know. I just feel it's one of those things. Sometimes with this stuff, I feel like if they would just look a little bit more at the comics and pull a little bit more directly from it, you know what I mean? That sometimes they get something a little bit stronger.
And James is hitting the nail on the head right here, because I was thinking about this as well. Not specifically the New Mutants, but he says, I think because of the New Mutant movie, they couldn't use Sunspot. I think that was a big issue with a lot of the characters that we're talking about. They didn't want to use them because they were already going to be used for a film project. And I think this is what this show was trying to navigate, was the issue of, oh, well, what are they going to do in the films? Well, let's just create new characters. And no, I don't think that was I don't think that was a good approach. But I think James hit the nail on the head that they didn't use Sunspot because the characters' rights were tied up with a different project.
And see, and I want to see the New Mutants movie. I've wanted to see it for a while, and it keeps getting pushed back. And that would have been a great thing for Disney to release. I said that before. Right now, with everything that's going on, is a perfect time to release New Mutants. I mean, they could make some pretty good bank with it, like that Crazy Trolls movie did. I mean, you know, why not? Why not? You know, they clearly don't have a plan for what they're going to do with the New Mutants film. It doesn't fit in really with the MCU, in all honesty, because that's a part of the old Fox X-Men continuity. As messed up as it is, it's supposed to fit within that universe. You know, why not just release the New Mutants movie right now as a, you know, for example, I enjoyed logging into Disney Plus to watch the first episode of The Gallery with the Mandalorian stuff. Like, you know, why not? You know, I just don't know. I don't understand why they're sitting on the New Mutants project. I really don't, especially right now, because it's a project that has a built-in audience. It's something in a general box office. Depending upon when they release it, the competition is going to be too tough unless it's a really good movie. That's my only thought. They think it's a really good movie and they think it could hit, and that's why they're sitting on it. That would be my best bet, because otherwise I think they should have released it by now. But that's just my opinion.
Well, lots of movies are being pushed back right now. I mean, that's something that's happening all over the place. The New Mutants is not unique in that regard.
I only say New Mutants because that film has been basically in a weird holding pattern for a very, very long time. Like it seemed like there was never a good time to release that movie. That's why I think they should just do it now, because why not?
No, I think you have a good argument. I think you have a good argument there, definitely, because in a lot of ways, New Mutants would kind of be the end of the Fox era of X-Men, right? Because that was the last production done under their tenure, or is it the first one done under Disney's tenure?
No, it's the last. It's the last of the Fox X-Men stuff. It's the last one.
So I think that's a good argument to release it. You know, I think that would be a good argument to release it. Because obviously we're going to eventually have the X-Men incorporated into the MCU. That's a no-brainer. So,
right.
And the Fantastic Four, by the way, I'm really interested to see what the MCU version of the Fantastic Four is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if they released it right now, it would feel like an offshoot thing. So if it doesn't hit really big, well, at least it's out. You know what I mean? And they'd be able to recoup some monies off of it, making it a home premiere release. You know what I mean? And just get it out there. And then that way too, if it doesn't really click with people, you know, then they're not obligated to follow up on it anyway. It's like, oh, well, that was that movie they released during the, you know, the pandemic, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, interestingly enough, James says Fox scheduled New Mutants for an April 13th, 2018 release originally. I didn't realize that. It was actually supposed to be April of 2018. That's crazy.
That's what I'm saying. This film keeps getting pushed back. It's been in a holding pattern forever. That's why I don't. Seriously. That's why I don't understand why they didn't just release it right now. Those of us that are diehard X-Men fans that are really curious about the New Mutants movie, I would pay to watch it. You know, so, and I'm very curious about it, as opposed to, for example, the Birds of Prey movie, which I could go in there and rent and watch tonight, and I still haven't seen it yet. But the New Mutants movie, I want to watch. So. There you go.
Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer. Who knows? Who knows why they're not releasing it? That would be a good story to pursue, to try to find out why that is. Why is New Mutants being shelved for been shelved for so long, and why does it continue not to come out?
Well, I know part of it initially was because of the Disney buyout, but and then of course right now it'd be the pandemic, but I don't know. it's a troubled production. I think eventually, whenever it does get released, I wouldn't be surprised if there is, a lot of people produce YouTube videos that talk about the troubled history of the New Mutants movie, especially if it turns out, surprise, it's really good. That'll be the big shocker, because I would assume that's why they've been sitting on it all this time. It's actually really good, and so they don't want to. It's like, well, this movie's pretty good. Let's because I've heard some people theorize that, oh, well, they'll use New Mutants as if it's been happening in the MCU all along, and I'm like, well, it better be a darn good movie if they're going to do that. Like, if they're going to shoehorn that in that way, that's got to be a great movie. So,
well, maybe one of the difficulties is that they do feel it's a strong movie, but it won't fit with the MCU, so they're not sure what to do with it. I could see that scenario.
Yeah, I could see that too. And I apologize.
Dave?
I'm still here. Sorry, I had a hard time getting to my my mute button to turn my mic back on. No, yeah, I do think it's an issue of that they're having a hard time figuring out where it should sit, and because it is going to cause confusion with the MCU and where does it fit in, because everyone's so excited and everyone's all hoping for how it's all good, because that's the thing, that the MCU has been so successful, it sort of always brings to the question, well, how does this fit in with continuity? So and that way they're kind of like a victim of their own success. Everything needs to seem like it kind of fits in. So there you go. That's the the whole problem, I think, in a bit of a nutshell. So
James mentions that it says this was also when Marvel was killing off the mutants in their comics. I think he's arguing that maybe they were trying to reflect the comics in some way at that time.
Right. I could see that. Too. Are we good to maybe segue out of this and start to get into pop culture news?
That sounds good to me.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So if you don't mind, if I'll lead off pop culture news tonight, over here on we're looking at my screen right now. I wanted to highlight this and showcase this. I shared this on our Facebook page, and I also shared it on my personal page and a few other places, but Free Comic Book Day actually would have been this last weekend. And there's a lot of really great material on Comixology that you can actually get right now, essentially for free. Now, these are digital versions through Comixology. I think everyone knows I'm a bit of a Comixology fan. I do enjoy digital comics. So on here on the screen, we've got pulled up here. I've selected these for a very specific reason, everyone. So the first we're going to talk about here, this is Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus Volume 1. So in the 90s, a lot of the different companies, Malibu and Darkhorse, I think would probably be two of the ones that most people would remember. They tried to launch their own superhero universes. So Malibu had what they called the Ultraverse, and then the Darkhorse Heroes, this was originally called something else. And they had a whole bunch of different, sort of like Steel City and Harbor this, and there were all these different pockets within the Darkhorse Comics universe where these different superhero entities existed, and they were all within the same world. So I really enjoyed the Darkhorse Heroes material. Specifically, I'm talking about Ghost and X. And so Darkhorse has made a lot of this material available on Comixology. These are omnibus collections too, everyone. These are omnibus collections. This is not like a free trial issue. For example, Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus, when they made this available, we'll read the summary here for this one real quick, but it just says, in the not so distant past, the first nuclear weapon test changed the world forever, but not in the way we expected. Unleashed upon the planet was a microscopic technological virus of unknown origin that infected millions. Some to no effect, some to horrifying agonies and disfigurement. others with the gift of incredible and sometimes terrifying power. But would a world populated by supermen become a battleground for good against evil or bad against worse? It is true that with great power comes great responsibility. Or does it truly come with great license? Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus collects Comics Greatest World. That was the name I was trying to come up with. Comics Greatest World and Will to Power, the two-hit maxi series created by Darkhorse Comics that turned the concept of the superhero universe on its head, bringing together an all-star team of creators. So Comics Greatest World, that was the title. This contains Will to Power. Will to Power is still, for my money, in my estimation, the best Superman gone wrong story I've ever read. I love Will to Power, but you have to be kind of in the Comics Greatest World universe to really get the connections, to really enjoy Will to Power to its fullest extent. So what I talked to Eric about, I pitched him this idea over the weekend. I have downloaded Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus Volume 1. Again, you can download this from free, the digital version from Comixology. I forget how many pages it says over here. This is 487 pages, y'all. This is a lot. This is a lot of fun reading, okay? So I downloaded Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus. I also, if it'll come up here, I also actually downloaded the Omnibus version actually for Ghost as well. If you'll notice here, Ghost Omnibus Volume 1 is also available for free. This is 353 pages. This material is really, I love this material. It's really good. This is sort of like a female version of the Shadow in my mind. It's just, I love this material. So I downloaded Ghost Omnibus Volume 1, and I also downloaded the Omnibus actually for X. So the Volume 1 Omnibus for X is also available on Comixology right now for free. This is, again, 354 pages. This stuff is fun if you love comics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start reviewing and reading and working my way through all three of these omnibuses on the show. I'm going to focus on it on the audio podcast because we've been looking for a direction for the audio show currently. So I'm going to basically review every single issue in all these omnibuses on the audio show, and I'm going to do a little snippet on the live show. But we're gonna get knee deep into the Comics Greatest World and talk a little bit more about comics on the show for a little while. I love this material, and I'm very excited about this. And I want to recommend everyone. I don't know how long you're going to be able to download these for free. So if you want to read along with me and join me on this journey, it's on Comixology. You might have to get the app for your phone. You can read it on your tablet. You can read it on your desktop. But the ones I'm going to be talking about specifically is Darkhorse Heroes. I'm going to be doing Ghost, and I'm going to be doing X. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Darkhorse Heroes first. I'm going to do X second, and I'm going to do Ghost last. And like I said, this is really great material. X is sort of a very gritty, dark Batman, but this is just some really fun stuff. So I want to encourage everyone, go to Comixology, check out what they've got going on. A lot of fun stuff became available when they did Free Comic Book Day. And like I said, this is not like you're downloading a single trial issue or 16 pages of something. This is the totality of X Omnibus Volume 1. It's 354 pages. It's some fun stuff. I think a lot of people would enjoy the Comics Greatest World universe if they were to give it a shot. So
very cool. That's a lot of content too. That's a lot of content for free. That's an amazing amount of content for free. And we've talked about quarantine streams. This is a quarantine read for sure. If you read all this stuff, so that's a lot of material.
And it's a lot of fun material. The Ghost stuff is really great. The X stuff is a lot of fun. And like I said, Will to Power, which is actually in the Darkhorse Heroes Omnibus Volume 1, that's my favorite Superman Gone Wrong story. I've always loved Will to Power. And it's a lot of really great talent. Actually, one of the artists who does a lot of this work that we're going to hopefully spotlight in one of the magazines coming up. So definitely take a look at this material on Comixology. There's a lot of other stuff too that Darkhorse made available to. Empowered by Adam Warren, Volume 1's available too. Like, there's a lot of great material that basically you can get on Comixology right now for free. But it's not just in the free section. You have to dig around and know kind of what you're looking for. So I wanted to highlight these because I specifically want to go issue by issue in this content. And like I said, I'm very excited about this. So it'll probably be starting. I need to get the fanzine to bed first, but right after that, I'm going to start doing audio reviews again, starting with Darkhorse Heroes 1. That's where we're going to start. Then I'm going to do X. That'll be second, and then the last one will be Ghost. So I'm going to do every single issue. So I hope that you guys will follow along, and we'll have some fun with this.
Very, very cool. And again, like I said, that's a lot of cool free content there. Sure, there's a lot of people that'll be interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what, almost 800, just shy of 800 pages of free comics. I mean, that's amazing. And this stuff's good. This is top talent. It's not like it's, I don't know. I like so much stuff, though. It could just be me, but I really liked a lot of this material when it originally came out. And it was really strong. And these are really great characters. X is a great character. Ghost is a great character. Titan is a great character. So these are totally worth following and checking out. And Darkhorse has been producing great material for a very long time. And I thought it'd be fun, too, to kind of highlight and talk about Darkhorse, too, because a lot of people thought of Darkhorse only for their licensed properties. They only think of Darkhorse for Star Wars at one time, or they only thought of Darkhorse for Aliens and Aliens versus Predator, and that's all great stuff, and I love all that stuff too. But Darkhorse, a lot of other great material too, whether you want to talk about their Comics Greatest World material, whether you want to talk about them working with Paul Chadwick and doing Concrete. There's just a lot of great material that company's published, and I thought this is kind of a fun way to talk about Darkhorse and talk about again, because with the Retro Rogues, an older series, and this is a great way too. People can follow along, and it's not going to cost you anything. But you're going to need to get on those downloads pretty quick, because I don't know how long this material is going to just stay available for free. So,
right on. And I did want to give a shout out to PJ. PJ was in the house. I'm not sure if he's still here, but Orville Nation. PJ, it's good to see you coming out and supporting us as you always do. And everybody out there, please support PJ's channel, Orville Nation. They're pretty much our biggest supporters on YouTube right now. So we always want to send some love their way. And we were talking about the official fanzine. PJ is going to be featured in that. So important to remember that PJ will be featured in the first official Retro Rogues fanzine.
Yes. And I've been on, of course, we've both been on, actually, Orville Nation. He gets a lot of great interviews. It's just a really great show with a lot of, I mean, he's just got a lot of fun content. I know that right now he's been talking to some people that are in the process of doing like an Orville fan film. So yeah, definitely check out what PJ's got.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that Orville fan film?
I didn't see the first one, just because, in all honesty, I'm trying to do too much. So when I haven't been laying in bed trying to heal, I have been just drawing, and I've done a lot of writing actually for the magazine. That's the other thing too. There's a lot of writing that goes into it. So we're very excited to have PJ in the first issue, hopefully coming up here. Like I said, hopefully just another week.
And PJ says, I'm very honored by that, guys. PJ, we are honored to have you in it. That's all I'm going to say, is we are very honored to have you in it. You do fantastic work. You've got a great channel, and you're a great supporter of other creators, and we want to keep that going. You know what I mean? You support us, we support you. That's what it's all about. So
yeah, for sure. So we're still in the midst of pop culture news. Eric, what do you have for this episode of Pop Culture News?
This is an interesting story. Could be viewed as a hopeful story, depending on your perspective, I suppose. But this is an interesting story. So this comes from WDW News Today, which I believe is Walt Disney World News Today. And it says, confirmed, Shanghai Disneyland opens May 11th with reservation only, limited attendance, and temperature screenings. Chapek states other Disney parks will follow same protocol when reopening. So that's official from the CEO of Disney, Bob Chapek. He is saying that the guidelines that they're going to be using at the Shanghai Disney are going to be similar to what they do worldwide at their other locations. Specifically, would be those of us who live in North America are looking at Disney World and Disneyland. Those of you in Europe may be looking at Euro Disney, or and also there's one in Tokyo, as I remember too. So they're all over the world. So it says, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 in China, Shanghai Disney Resort has been closed since late January. During today's Walt Disney Company Q2 earnings call, it was announced that Shanghai Disneyland Park will reopen on May 11th. The reopening will take into account guest capacity for social distancing, as well as health and prevention procedures that comply with local guidelines. And you can see this picture here shows you a line to one of the attractions, or actually that's probably just to get into the park. And those of you that have done any grocery shopping, that have actually ventured out of your house in the last couple of months, that go grocery shopping, will probably recognize this setup. Because if you go grocery shopping, they have something similar. Like they have this designated area where you're supposed to stand. And you can see this. They have these barricades, and they have these specific areas where people are supposed to stand to obviously encourage and enforce social distancing. It says, over the span of the last few weeks, we've seen various forms of testing going on at the resort, from the return of character dining to new seating guidelines at shows and theaters, plus newly installed temporary queues with floor markings to establish social distancing. That's a picture I just showed you guys. Shanghai Disneyland is also where we've seen the expanded use of health QR and temperature checks, with only those showing normal temperatures and a green QR code allowed in. Now, this is something I find interesting, if this is something they're actually going to do in the States. Because right now, we don't even have a health QR code or something like that. And a lot of you may not even know what that is. I could do a whole show about that. But there are these apps where you can get these health QR codes that basically say you're good to go. You haven't been exposed, or you haven't had corona, or you already got over it, and they show that. So I'm kind of curious to see whether they're going to try to do something like that at the States or not. But the temperature checks are also interesting, because that's not something that happens a lot in the States, where you actually see people doing temperature checks of attendees. Certainly places are doing temperature checks for employees, mostly in the healthcare industry in the States. But you don't really see that for instance, you don't go to the supermarket and they don't take your temperature. At least they don't here. I've seen that done in other countries, but they don't do that here. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that they do at the Disneyland or Disney resorts here in the United States. It does say visitors will also need to make reservations to visit in order for the resort to limit and control the number of guests in the park. It says no further details are available at this time regarding how the booking process will work. And that for sure they will probably use here. So what they did is they came up with a number. I think they decided on like 25% capacity. And so you can't just show up. You won't be able to just show up to Disneyland and walk in like you normally would. You're going to have to get your tickets ahead of time, and then they're going to let you in. So Dave, had you heard about any of this?
I know that there were plans to do some kind of a reopen, and I know there had been discussions about when obviously some of the newer constructions, whether you're talking about the parks or you're talking about some of the new attractions, when they would actually come online. I was not familiar with the whole, process they were going to use at all, though. So that's
well, there
totally
it is.
new to me. Yeah.
And Chapek is confirming that they're going to use that. The thing that stuck out in my mind was the QR codes, because as far as I know, there's no state doing that in the United States. I know that there was talk of Google and Apple combining to put some sort of app together. These kind of apps are common in Asia. For instance, I know they use an app in Singapore. They use one in South Korea. Obviously, they use one in China. But I haven't seen that too much in the West. In fact, I'm not even sure what countries in Europe are using those sort of QR code things. So it'll be interesting to see if they implement that here as well. But definitely, I'm sure having to have a reservation and limiting the capacity is going to be part of their open up strategy. And then James said it changes the season ticket holder. That's interesting. I didn't think about that, how it might affect people that have season tickets to the parks, because I don't live in California or Florida, so I've never had a season ticket. That's interesting. I didn't think about that because that's not really addressed in this article either.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you would think it would, but I would assume they've got to make some changes anyway, just because of how long that the parks have been shut down, and they're not even still sure exactly when they're going to be reopening, nor how many people. Again, they're going to they're talking about here limiting. You know what I mean? So there's that as well. Because you think with a season ticket, you should just be able to go whenever you want to go. That you should have some sort of priority. And then obviously, if you don't, then that changes obviously the status of what it is. So it would change it quite a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see where we are and how things change when we get on the other side of this thing. To see like if things just change moving forward, or if they're kind of like a temporary thing. Because there's all kinds of stuff still coming out. I don't want to get too far into that because that gets into the mire of the sort of downbeat things that are happening. So I don't want to get too far into that. But it's going to be interesting to see how things change. And, sometimes these changes are not necessarily, for the bad. Like, for example, here in PV, they're Prescott Valley. I say PV like everyone knows I'm talking about. Prescott Valley, Arizona, where I live. The city is getting ready to actually put on a couple of drive-in movie nights actually at the event center that currently they can't have events. They're going to put up a screen and actually do a free drive-in movie night coming up. And two of the films are showing, Space Jam's the first one, and then League of Their Own is the second one. And they're doing that free for the community, so they've got something fun, to go check out. So, and I had been talking about it. It's like, well, drive-ins, this is an interesting opportunity for the ones that still exist, and maybe if those who are entrepreneurial, maybe there's an interesting opportunity here as well. So it doesn't mean that everything that's going to happen that's going to come out of this necessarily going to be bad. There might be some fun things that we all used to love and enjoy that might actually come back. So we'll see where we are. That's interesting though, Eric, because I'd been wondering how they were going to do that, but I hadn't heard the whole using of the QR code thing and whatever. I'm familiar with QR codes just from publishing. There was a fad and a fascination with it. I think it's kind of gone away now, where you'd have the QR code. So, for example, you bought a comic and it'd have a QR code and you would scan it and it would send a download link directly to your phone where you could download a digital edition of a publication. I think that's kind of gone the way of the whatever extinct species you want to reference right here. But that's interesting.
Yeah, and I am interested to see how they're going to deal with season ticket holders, because they didn't mention that in this article. I don't know if it's any different in China, but it'll be interesting to see. And again, this is a path forward. This is a way to reopen. This is how they're going to reopen. And again, Chapek has said this is the model they're going to follow worldwide. So it's right there for everybody to check out.
Very cool. I have only one more pop culture news item for tonight that's actually video game related. So some people who know me are familiar with my love of fighting games, and I have loved the two-person fighting games since forever. It seems like ever since the first time I played the original Street Fighter, I've just been in love with this sort of genre of video game. And Street Fighter being my favorite, but Mortal Kombat being a very close second favorite. We used to have tournaments and stuff at my house where people would come out and we would write out like the standings and stuff and everything, and had a lot of fun with it. Ironically, the game that used to bring out the most number of people is a game most people have never heard of or even remember, called Kensei, or Sacred Fist. That was actually the game that everybody loved the most. But Mortal Kombat, I love the Mortal Kombat versus DC game that came out several years ago. My brother and I used to play that all the time, actually over the internet. So I'd put on a headset, he put on his headset, and we challenge each other, and we would fight constantly. And so I've been kind of keeping up with what's going on with Mortal Kombat 11. I don't have a PlayStation 4, or I don't have the I forget what the name of it is now. The Microsoft version video game console.
Xbox.
What is it? Xbox. Thank you.
Yep.
You know, it's so funny because at one time we were invited to develop stuff for Xbox, and we were doing Star Gods, and I could never remember the name of the Xbox. But anyhow, so it's going to be available for a bunch of different systems. And one of the things I had missed was in one of the other versions of Mortal Kombat, you could play Spawn. So I was excited to see that Spawn was going to be back for this new version. But that wasn't enough to make me pull the trigger and actually run out and buy a new game system. The thing was today's announcement. And that's
RoboCop.
The fact that friggin' RoboCop is going to be in Mortal Kombat. Are you kidding me? So this will be, according to the announcement, this will be the version of RoboCop from RoboCops 1 and 2. Peter Weller is doing the voice. I'm not sure if that means they're just going to take lines from the movies that he's already done, or if he's going to record some new dialogue for it.
Oh, wow.
But Peter Weller will be doing the voice of RoboCop in the game. He's going to have, obviously, his trademark pistol, but he's also going to have the flamethrower, which was actually something he had actually in a RoboCop 3. He had the flamethrower that was also attached to that multi-purpose machine gun arm thing that he would put on. I love RoboCop. I've loved this character since I saw the original movie. One of my prized possessions that actually is in the studio, you can't see it, but it's on display right now, is I have the original Marvel Comics magazine adaptation, the black and white, the very first adaptation of RoboCop in comic book form, actually signed by the gentleman who actually drew that. I love that. I've had every version of RoboCop action figure they've ever made. I've seen just about everything they've ever done. I've read just about everything they've ever done, whether you want to talk about the Marvel Comics series, the later series where different people picked up the license. I love this. This is awesome. I'm very, very, very excited. So I just wanted to bring this up. So those of you who may not know, RoboCop is coming to Mortal Kombat. How friggin' cool is that? So
Jane says your younger brother played the video games really well, especially boxing at the age of 3.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Was your brother the big gamer in the house?
Yeah, he is. He's always been the big gamer in the house. And that's always been his kind of fascination. I think at one point, I don't remember at one, I have a bad habit of listening to the advice of people sometimes. So someone told me many, many years ago, they said, you know what, you can keep playing video games or you can actually focus on your career. You're going to have to pick. And so I decided to focus on my career. Now, the irony of that is there's a lot of people working in the industry and they actually made business contacts because they would play with other industry professionals over the internet. And so friendships and stuff have been made and people have gotten a lot of amazing opportunities playing video games. So
I know someone that met her husband that way.
See, there you go.
PlayStation Network for, I think it was the PlayStation 3. Now, did I hear you right that you're actually going to buy a gaming system because of this game? Did I hear that right?
Yes, I'm seriously considering it.
Which system?
I mean, I kind of want to do the PS4 because PlayStation's the one I'm most familiar with. Because I still have all my versions of the PlayStation, and I still have all of my games. I really like the Sony PlayStation a lot. So my initial thought would be that I would get the PlayStation 4 because that's what I'm most familiar with and that's what I enjoy the most from the past. Because it's like when I played Mortal Kombat versus DC, I played it on the PS3, the Battlestar Galactica game. Nobody talks about that PS3 Battlestar Galactica game or PlayStation 2 Battlestar Galactica game. I still own it. I haven't played it in a little while, but I used to love to play that Battlestar Galactica game. It was just amazing just to be able to fly a Viper. So,
Right.
yeah, so I'm a big PlayStation supporter. So that would be my initial predication would be to do the PlayStation 4. That's what I discussed with my brother. And he was giving me some advice. He's like on how to time it, to wait to when to buy it and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, okay. So I'll probably just follow his advice and his recommendation. Because it's like, if we have the same system, it'd be fun because then he and I could play against each other,
Right.
So that would be a lot of fun. Because I used to just to give a little bit of context, I used to do Street Fighter tournaments back in the day too, and there was many a Saturday night. Like that's all I did was just fight people all night long in Street Fighter, and so I've always loved this kind of stuff. So I'm so excited at the idea of actually being able to be RoboCop in this scenario, And then if I get frustrated, I get to lean back on a character I know really well, like Sub-Zero. So that's the thing I'm kind of excited about. It just sounds like a lot of fun. And like I said, I didn't get to play Spawn in the last version of the game when they had Spawn in the game, and I think it'd be fun to play Spawn. I know the Terminator's in here too. I think it's the T-800 from the most recent movie is also going to be in this as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't think they're done making announcements, but this is the announcement that caught my attention. I was like, RoboCop and Mortal Kombat? Sign me up.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
So,
that's very cool. And I had no idea about this before you brought it up. So I haven't bought a Mortal Kombat game, gosh, in probably over a decade. The last one I remember owning was the N64 Sub-Zero game. So I haven't had a Mortal Kombat game in forever. And I do have some fighting games. Like I have what is it, Justice Unlimited? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but that's a fighting game with all the DC characters.
Yeah, the Injustice series, yeah.
Injustice, yeah, that's what it is. My brother bought that for me. And I do enjoy those games because especially if you can get the social aspect going of either a family member or, as you mentioned, now you can play people online. That gives you a lot more playability with the game. So it's kind of fun to hear you saying that. So who knows? Maybe in the future the two of us can stream one of our battles or something like that.
No, yeah, I'd be totally down to do that because like I said, my brother, like especially the DC versus Mortal Kombat. I mean, now we did other stuff too. Like I used to be big into Rock Band, so and my wife actually played along, and we got eventually we had the whole setup with the drums and the guitars and the microphone and the whole kit and caboodle, and so my brother was actually a part of our band too. So it wasn't just fighting games, but my particular fascination normally is with fighting games, and I think it's just because of my love of martial arts. We used to play. We would play that Mortal Kombat versus DC game just like nonstop, and it was just so much fun because it was just sort of like you could just settle it. Who would win between Superman and Shazam? Okay, well let's settle it. So
I always wanted that game, but I never got around to buying it. Like I was always kind of waiting for it to go on sale, and then eventually it did go on sale. Greatest Hits came out, and I got something else instead. So that was one that I was really interested in, was the DC versus Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, and then like I enjoyed. Of course, they did the Marvel. That game was a lot of fun too. That had all the different. You could be Captain America versus, Spider-Man. And they had the X-Men version. The X-Men version was a lot of fun too, and that was done in kind of that Street Fighter, hyper stylized kind of look style. Like all that stuff was so much fun. So just this announcement of RoboCop in a Mortal Kombat game, it just takes all these fun things that I loved and it just kind of pushes them all together. And I'm just and then I could play Spawn too, but I could also be Sub-Zero, or I could be Raiden, or I could be, you know what I mean? Like, so for me, this just sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. So when I found out about this, I was like, well, heck, we got to talk about this on the show. Cause RoboCop is, it's interesting because Bernie Wrightson, who I got to know a little bit from the convention scene. Bernie Wrightson used to always say, whenever anyone would ask him the question, or he'd be standing around and someone asked the question, what did he think was the best, superhero comic book style movie that had been made? And it was interesting because his answer for the longest time, until The Incredibles came out, his answer for the longest time was RoboCop.
Yeah.
And when you think about that movie and the way it's put together and everything that's happens in it, it's very much that kind of idea of that kind of story, but it has so many new kind of interesting elements to it that just makes it really interesting. But I've loved RoboCop since forever, and when I saw this, I was like, oh hell yeah, sign me up. So yeah, this is enough to move the trigger for me. No pun intended. So
Very cool. Very cool.
all right, so that's going to be my last pop culture story for tonight. I wanted to talk about this because I thought this was really exciting. We're going to probably have a ton of stories for next episode, but I wanted to talk about this, and I specifically wanted to talk about, if people want to follow along, go get those downloads for those Darkhorse comics, and hopefully, read and follow along and be part of the discussion for that stuff. So those are my main stories. Do you have anything else for pop culture for tonight's show?
Yes, I do. So here's a deadline story. And it's pretty interesting. So this is from May 4th, just a couple days ago. And this is a very, very preliminary story. But it says, out of this world, Tom Cruise plots movie to shoot in space with Elon Musk's SpaceX. It says exclusive. I'm hearing that Tom Cruise and Elon Musk's SpaceX are working on a project with NASA that would be the first narrative feature film and action adventure to be shot in outer space. It's not a Mission Impossible film, and no studio is in the mix at this stage, but look for more news as I get it. But this is real, a bet in the early stages of liftoff. So they are claiming that Tom Cruise, who is well known for doing many of his own stunts, and some death-defying stunts at that, amazing stunts at that. In fact, we've been covering some of the stuff that's been going on with the Top Gun Maverick, which I know Dave has been highly anticipating, as have I. And one of the things that came out in the coverage of that was that Tom Cruise wanted to go up in like a, not only did he go up in a real fighter jet, but he actually wanted to pilot it, and they said no. So Tom Cruise is obviously a real thrill seeker when it comes even to his filmmaking process. And it looks like this is something that they're seriously looking into, that there are preliminary discussions for Tom Cruise to film an actual movie in outer space. What do you think of that, Dave?
I had heard this because it actually made like the nightly CBS News. So I saw this actually covered actually a little while before we started recording the show tonight. I'm not too terribly surprised at this idea that Tom Cruise would want to take this to like the next level. I think with every film he's looking for a new hook or a new stunt. So this is an interesting idea. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to be different that they're going to capture that we kind of haven't already seen in a science fiction movie to this point, other than the fact that it's actually shot in space for real. So I'm as we learn more about it, I'm interested. I'm curious because normally I like most of the films that Tom Cruise has done. Like I can't think of a Tom Cruise movie I went and saw that I didn't like. And he's made some pretty good films people don't talk about very much, like, on the science fiction. And like I enjoyed Oblivion. I never hear anybody talk about Oblivion. I thought Oblivion was a pretty fun sci-fi movie. Felt like a little bit like a 70s throwback kind of film, but I enjoyed Oblivion. And then there was what's the Live, Die, Repeat one? I know that has multiple movie titles, but it's the one where he dies and then he gets resurrected and brought back.
Oh yeah, that's a great underrated film.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that film, and I have the same problem because the marketing's confusing. Like you said, there's multiple titles to that film, and it was a real surprise to me when I saw that film. I really enjoyed that. That was an original sci-fi film, not a franchise, and I remember being like, "Wow, that's really cool. That's a neat idea."
Edge of Tomorrow. Bobby Chambers actually just came into the comment. Edge of Tomorrow. You're correct, Bobby Chambers. That's right. Edge of Tomorrow. That was a really good, a really fun science fiction film. And then I enjoyed the Jack Reacher movies. I enjoyed all the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah, I mean, he's done a lot of fun stuff. So I'm, one of my most anticipated films of this year was Top Gun Maverick. So, I'll be excited to see what he comes up with and what they do with it. It was weird because I'd heard this story, but as you were reading it, I kept thinking about they released the first Space Force trailer with Steve Carell, which is sort of like a comedy series from the people that did The Office. And as you were reading the story, I kept seeing that stuff play out on my head, but obviously it wouldn't be anything like that. It'd be something a lot more fun in terms of like action, adventure, entertainment. No. I mean, as we learn more, I'm curious to see. Like I said, he's done a lot of fun science fiction films that I've really enjoyed over the last several years. So, yeah, I mean, I'm down. I like I said, my only thought is I can't imagine what they're going to do that they haven't somehow simulated at this point, other than this time it would be for real.
Orville Nation says, I bet they will actually do this in a few years. And I'm thinking they will too. Tom Cruise is just crazy enough to do this. He's the one guy I think that could actually make this happen. I think he has some good relationships as far as with the military and things like that, where I think he actually could get this done. And then Manisan is in the house too. And he was giving a shout out to Orville Nation as well. Manisan, it's good to see you in the chat. And please feel free to make comments or questions or what have you. So, but I think I'm looking forward to this. I think it would be awesome to see a film actually made in space. I'm totally on board, pun intended. And I think that would just be amazing. Madison also says, seems like Tom Cruise enjoyed his stint remaking Top Gun so much that he'd like to aim a little higher. I see what you did there, Manasan. I see what you did there. And yes, I agree. I think that's exactly what he's doing. I think, let's face it, Tom Cruise is getting older and he's accomplished a lot. Where else is there to go? It's time to get off the planet. You know what I mean? Where else can you go now? Literally, right?
Very true. Very true. Cool. So that's, do you have anything else for pop culture tonight, or?
I do. I've got a couple other fun stories for everybody. Here's a follow-up of something that we've been talking about a little bit previously. And this is a brief article also from Deadline. And the headline reads, Battlestar Galactica. Michael Lesslie to write and exec produce Peacock reboot of sci-fi franchise. We got a picture over here of the director as well as the classic Battlestar Galactica over here. It says exclusive, Peacock's reboot of Battlestar Galactica has found its world builder. Michael Lesslie, who was the lead writer and showrunner of AMC's spy drama The Little Drummer Girl, has penned scripts for Macbeth and Assassin's Creed, will create, write, and executive produce the series. And it says, NBC Universal produced the original Glenn A. Larson created Battlestar Galactica series for ABC. UCP, then known as Universal Cable Productions, produced the successful Ronald D. Moore revamp that ran from 2004 to 2009 on the then Sci-Fi Channel. There's a little recap about the different shows, but at the end here, this is a quote from Lesslie himself. He said, quote, I am beyond excited to be taking on this iconic and inspirational show. As a lifelong devotee, I know that the possibilities of Battlestar Galactica's world are infinite and that each iteration has raised the bar for epic and intelligent sci-fi storytelling. The teams at Esmail Corps, UCP, and Peacock are second to none. And I already know that we are going to honor Glenn A. Larson and Ronald D. Moore's landmark series with break new boundaries with our own vision. It's a dream come true, one I just can't wait to share with fans, new and old alike. So say we all. So have you heard about this, Dave, about the announcement that they're they're going forward with this Battlestar Galactica reboot and the person that's going to be responsible for it.
I had heard this. I hadn't delved into it too far, just because there's a lot of conflicting reports about how it's certainly going to be a continuation of Ronald D. Moore, but then some people talk about it as if it's just a straight up reboot. Either way, I'm down for more Battlestar Galactica. I would love something that would be a little bit more of a return to the original, just because that to me is like we'll call it a pillar, we'll call it a cornerstone of my science fiction fandom. That's what Battlestar Galactica is. I mean, I can sugarcoat it any way I want, but it's a cornerstone of my science fiction fandom. Battlestar Galactica is as important to me as Star Trek, as Star Wars. I mean, it's that important. And like, as we've had conversations off air too that other people have not been privy to, but that I enjoyed the Ronald D. Moore, the Reimagined series a lot, but I obviously love the classic. The classic for me is the epitome, but there was so much great stuff that they did with the Ronald D. Moore series that I loved too. So I had read some of these news stories. I was aware that he was going to be the showrunner putting it together. But I haven't delved too far into it, just because I'm waiting for a little bit more to come out concrete that tells us for sure if it's just a straight up reboot or if it's somehow in continuity. There's obviously, again, you and I again off the air have discussed that there's a lot of room where they could take BSG, the newer version of the series, and kind of, because they did talk about the idea that it's cyclical, that this has all happened before and will happen again. So there's room there to reimagine that and still keep it, kind of in continuity. So I don't know. We'll have to see what they do.
Yeah, there's definitely room. You're absolutely correct as far as Ronald D. Moore's version. I hope they don't go that direction. I actually hope that this is like a real kind of a reimagining, if you will, that they kind of incorporate elements of both without really trying to do the continuity. I don't see how they could do the continuity with the original series, for instance, because so many of the original actors are dead, unfortunately. But I would love to still see members of both casts that are still alive, from the original cast and also from Ron D. Moore's versions come into it, maybe even playing characters that are similar to the characters they played in their own shows. Like it would be awesome to see like Dirk Benedict back, is doing something in Battlestar Galactica. I would just love to see that. And then also, it would be nice to see Edward James Olmos at the same time. But I actually don't. This is one of the times that I think going with continuity would be a bad idea. And the thing that I'm hopeful about is that what Leslie's saying is that he's going to be respectful to both visions. And therefore, I think he has to do something a little different rather than, because if he went with the Ronald D. Moore, for instance, if he did continuity with Ronald D. Moore, that's kind of shoving the Glenn Larson version to the curb, in my opinion. So I would rather kind of see him do his own version that somehow appeals to both. And, ultimately it's that dream gig, right? You try to shore up the original fans, you try to shore up the new fans, and then you try to get brand new fans. You know what I mean? So you try to get something that really does appeal to everyone. And it sounds like it's impossible, but it's not. You don't have to have polarizing entertainment that just appeals to one branch or the other. And James has a great pitch. He says, "Is Kit the Earth's first Cylon?" There you go. Let's do that. We'll just have it as Kit the car. It's the first Cylon, and we'll do it in that continuity. That's brilliant. See, that's brilliant right there.
But see, then it gets confusing. It's like, which Kit are we talking about? Are we talking about the original Kit? Are we talking about the first reboot series, the syndicated second reboot series, the third one? Like, what? I know which Kit we're talking about, but I'm just trying to be.
We're talking about the original. Stuff. We know we're talking about the original for sure. By the way, I hear that joke all the time. That people say when they watch Kit, all they can think about is the Cylons every time they watch Knight Rider. So.
Oh yeah, and and that I can't remember his name. That actor, his voice is when I hear him talk, is just he's got to be one of the most iconic voices of the '80s. Him and then the guy who did the original opening narration for Battlestar Galactica. Those two voices. I'm gonna get on my phone here and look up who they are because real quick. So, but no, yeah, that I sure, why not? Let's have Kit be the Earth's first Cylon. That sounds like a good idea.
I love it. It's a great idea. I'm totally down for it. And then Man of Sand mentions, I feel like Ronald Moore's reboot was recent enough that it seems too soon to reboot it again. But I'll check it out to see what new take they have on the story. And I'm with you on that, Man of Sand. That's kind of how I feel. Definitely, Ron Moore's series. It hasn't been gone long enough to completely redo. A sequel. I'm not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility. That there's no way I would like it. But I want to get back to the roots of Battlestar Galactica a little bit more and get back into Larson's version a little bit more. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, and especially from the comments made by the showrunner, it sounds like he's going to go for that. He's going to try to get, because there were some original Battlestar Galactica fans, I think, that never got into Ronald Moore's version, and I think that there's still some hurt over that. So I would like to see those two fandoms come together while at the same time adding new fans. Again, I don't think entertainment has to be divisive. I think you can go about this the right way, and you can find somebody for everybody, so that it's going to be fun and it's going to be an enjoyable show. I've been burned a lot on this. Every time I'm anticipating a brand new show, it seems like I get burned on it. But I am at this point at least hopeful. And then Man of Sand also mentions, just so long as you don't give us Galactica 1980. So as long as we don't get Galactica 1980, I think I'm on board with you, Man of Sand. That's a good plan there.
And I looked it up just real quick. So Patrick Macnee, who of course was in the original Avengers, the 60s spy adventure television series, which I sometimes I feel like I should turn on my retro card in, but when I can't think of these names. Of course, the great Patrick Macnee did the original narration with the original Battlestar Galactica. And just when I hear his voice, I guess because of that, he did so much TV type stuff that I think of him as one of those classic definitive 80s kind of voices. And along those same lines, obviously William Daniels, I couldn't believe I couldn't remember his name either, because I'm actually in the process of actually rewatching Saint Elsewhere actually on Hulu right now. And William Daniels did the voice for Kit. And when I hear his voice too, it's one of those, it's just so, it's like Peter Cullen, who is the voice of Optimus Prime. There's just a handful of those voices. When you hear about them, they just immediately take me back to a different time and place. And I would put Patrick Macnee, William Daniels, and Peter Cullen all in that same club. When you hear them, because Peter Cullen, besides being the voice for Voltron, he did the opening narration for the intro for Voltron. And it's just that they just have those very distinctive voices. So when you hear them, they just immediately send you to a particular time and place. So anyhow.
And speaking of sounds, Man of Sand said, well, Knight Rider did use the turbo boost sound from Battlestar Galactica too. I remember that. And I remember people talking about that. And then PJ from Orville Nation, as he does, seems to have a little bit of information. I'm not sure if PJ has a little bit of inside information, possibly, but he says they are supposed to be doing an alternate story within the established Moore universe. That's his understanding, which is interesting. Again, I'm not a great fan of that idea, but I mean, it could be done well. Dave, you mentioned a very plausible way that could happen. It's right there within the continuity of the show, but we'll see. And PJ, if you have some insider knowledge there, please let us know that that's what's going on here, that this will indeed be an alternate story within the established Moore universe.
Very cool. And then Man of Sand brings up, Orville Nation, PJ actually says that he agrees with me that those voices are very iconic. And then Man of Sand says that Glenn Larson was the creator of both Battlestar Galactica and Knight Rider, right? So they could share the same continuity, the Larson verse, if you will.
Larson did a lot of stuff. Larson did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. him and I think Stephen J. Cannell, like they just did so much stuff. It's just absolutely insane. And
I'd
some
like
of
to
the,
see a reboot. I really like to see a reboot of Buck Rogers. I think both of us would love to see that.
Yeah, I would too.
I would love to
But
see Gil Gerard come back in some way and Aaron Gray come back in some way. I mean, you could even do it within the continuity of maybe a new Buck Rogers. You know what I mean? Like a new man from the the 24th century or something. I don't know, but I would love to see it. So,
well, the guy who was behind one of the original Star Trek fan TV shows that actually continued the original 60s Star Trek. I can't remember his name right now. It escapes me. But at one point, his production company had actually secured the rights to Buck Rogers, and they were doing a new Buck Rogers, and he was using a lot of the same people that had been helping him with his Star Trek Continues project. And they had actually shot some stuff for Buck Rogers, some previous stuff, and he actually did have Gil Gerard come back and Aaron Gray come back, and they basically played the mother and father for the new Buck Rogers, essentially.
I've seen that. I've seen what you're talking about, and I think a lot of people were really looking forward to that, and then it kind of petered out.
Yeah,
I guess they never went any further. And it was supposed to go back, I think, to the original version of Buck Rogers, like the way Buck Rogers, like it was supposed to be very, very retro, in that it was, back when when Buck Rogers was actually introduced in that era, that time era.
Exactly. Yeah.
And PJ agrees. He says, "Oh, dude, how great would Buck Rogers be?" Yep, absolutely. Buck Rogers would be awesome to see back.
Yeah, I would love to see them bring Buck Rogers back for sure. So yeah,
but done well, as he says. That's important too. I agree with you there, PJ. We've been burned too many times not to have that caveat. It has to be done well.
Right.
That goes for Battlestar Galactica as well. Absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
If Lesslie falls flat on his face, you're going to hear it here very soon. As soon as that show comes out, So we'll see.
Well, and
we'll see.
And like, for example, like I enjoy Blood and Chrome, so there, and that was to me, Blood and Chrome reminded me of sort of the Ronald D. Moore version of like the Gun on Ice Planet Zero. You know what I mean? Reimagined, obviously, pretty heavily, but that kind of idea. So Battlestar Galactica is such great source material when you look at it from the standpoint of, the original inspiration, the Chariots of the Gods kind of idea, whether you want to look at the original series, whether you want to look at all the fun stuff they did connecting it to ancient civilizations. There's so much there that can be done. And then you turn around and you look at what the Ronald D. Moore series did in terms of paralleling, real world concerns and things that were going on, and, bringing in sort of the drama and the tone, the way that they did it. I mean, there's all kinds of amazing things they could do with Battlestar Galactica, because that, every one of the Battlestar Galactica series always seems to kind of end under like questionable circumstances. The original was canceled just because of cost. Is my original understanding. I don't know how much ratings played into that, but I know cost played a huge role in that, because when they brought out 1980, you could tell that they'd stripped 1980's budget to the bare bone. And then you turn around.
That's kind of funny. That's kind of funny to say, because the original Battlestar Galactica recycled a lot of footage. Well, Battlestar Galactica 1980 really recycled a lot of footage.
Yeah, that was almost all it was. And there's a couple episodes of 1980 I like, but the majority of it's not very good.
We've pointed out, though, I think we pointed this out privately. I don't think we talked about it on the air, but it is important to remember Ronald D. Moore did not come up with the idea of human Cylons. Human Cylons comes from Galactica 1980.
Exactly. Yeah.
Important to remember, folks.
Yeah.
Important to remember.
But there's, again, the newer series. I mean, I'm not, it always seems like they want to say it's ratings, but I sometimes I don't know if it's ratings necessarily. I just feel like they get to a certain point where they're like, why are we still spending all this money on this sci-fi show? I feel like that's the reason shows end really quickly. It's not because it doesn't have great ratings sometimes, because the audience is still there. The core audience is there. I don't know. This is a long-winded conversation for another night, because I'm beginning to wax poetic. Well, cool. So what else do you have for pop culture tonight, Eric?
I think we're good to move into streaming wars. You good to move into streaming wars?
Yeah, we can move into streaming wars. I don't have my streaming wars banner up at the moment, unfortunately. Well, that'll work. Cool. All right. So on the streaming wars, typically what we do is we talk about things that are happening, obviously, in the world of streaming media, whether we're talking about things like Netflix, whether we're talking about Hulu, whether we're talking about Peacock, HBO Max sounds like it's going to be rolling out pretty soon. Basically, any one of the streaming services that you watch, as well as some of the free services where you want to talk about things like Pluto TV or Crackle. That's primarily what we cover in the streaming wars, things that kind of have piqued our interest. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I don't have anything for this particular episode's streaming wars segment. I was going to talk a little bit about the HBO Max thing, because it's a little bit of news coming out because it's getting ready to break. But I just kind of chose to not talk about it tonight. So tell me, Eric, what do you have for this episode segment of Streaming Wars?
All right, so we've had some new additions in the streaming wars, and I thought it would be good to get a little bit of update on what's going on with them. And I'm going to start out with one that Dave and I basically haven't had. I'm sorry, that Dave and I haven't really had any interest in, but I think it's still important to cover, so I'm going to. So this is from Slashfilm.com, and this is about Quibi. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Again, this was not a service that I was particularly interested in. But it says, the headline reads, Quibi could lose $500 million in 2020. $500 million. And Quibi just came out, by the way. And the article says, oh, excuse me. I need to get back up here. I'm having mine here because it's not showing the article correctly. Here we go. Oh, Quibi, Quibi, Quibi. Like Icarus, you flew too close to the sun with wings made of wax. And by that I mean you attempted to launch a new streaming service that no one seemed particularly interested in. And it looks like it's going to cost you to the tune of $500 million. However, Quibi isn't out of business yet, and the short-form streaming service still has enough money to keep the lights on, but for how long? Now, what's funny about this is, again, this is a service that I don't think Dave and I really had any interest in. And for those of you that don't understand what Quibi is, well, quite frankly, a lot of us don't understand what Quibi is. Quibi is supposed to compete for the mobile market, which we talked about before is dominated by YouTube, and people like us, creators like us, dominate the mobile streaming market. And Quibi is trying to get into that market using quote unquote like premium content. So the idea being that they're actually having these sort of micro shows that are like 10 minutes long. I actually saw recently that Reno 911 is coming back to Quibi, which I thought was interesting. But the problem is that this article talks about it. The problem is one of the big marketing points of Quibi was the idea that people would watch these 10-minute shows on their commute to work. So when they're using the subway, using the bus, maybe they're doing the carpool, right? They're doing the carpool to work. Hopefully not the people actually driving. But the idea was that people will watch these little mini-sodes on their phone as they're going to work. And guess what's happening right now? Do I have to say it? A lot of people are not going to work right now. So this is really hitting Quibi's bottom line. And the fact of the matter is, it says the Quibi app has reportedly been downloaded 3.1 million times, which sounds pretty good. But the problem is they're offering a 90-day free trial. So those 3.1 million people right now, they're not paying for it. And we're not going to know for some time yet whether they will pay for it. So this is pretty interesting. Again, I know, Dave, this is not something that you were all that interested in, but I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on Quibi's situation right now.
Well, I'm not too terribly surprised that they're losing money, just because when we had discussed this previously, there's just nothing content-wise on there that I'm terribly interested in. Okay, Reno 911 is coming back there. Okay, all right. That's not enough to, you know what I mean, to motivate me. That doesn't mean that it couldn't, that show was very popular when it was on. I'm sure it has the chance to pull a large audience. So I don't know. That's kind of the thing I said before when we talked about this. It's like with some of this stuff, at the end of the day, it doesn't just come down to, quantity of content. It does come down to quality content. But beyond that, it really hinges upon, well, what is the content? What is your niche? What is it that you represent in the marketplace? What is it that you particularly kind of have to offer to sell? For example, CBS All Access leans very heavily into the fact that, CBS All Access, that's Star Trek, right? When you turn around and you look at...
it has new Trek. Well, I guess it does have Star Trek as well.
But it has
right.
The original.
It has the original catalog as well. It's not all new Trek, but it's based on new Trek because you can find real Trek in other places. I just want to...
I know. I know. I know that you're... I know. But the only point I'm trying to make, though, is that from a marketing standpoint, they lean very heavily in that they're the source for Star Trek. Okay. And each one of the different services, as time goes on, they kind of have that thing that they're kind of known for, right? Netflix, what was the most popular thing people used to watch on there actually was Friends, or it was The Office, and they're losing that content to other providers. So when I think about a service like Quibi or any new service that's coming out, that's what you're going to have to do. How are you going to differentiate yourself from these other different services, in order to necessarily hold, for example, I can only look at from my own perspective, my attention, but unfortunately for Quibi, QB, whatever they want to call themselves, there's no content on there that I'm interested in, For example, at least with Apple Plus, they had that Snoopy in Space show that I'm still kind of interested in. I'm not going to pay for it, unless I could just get those episodes, but because I don't want to subscribe to. And that's the thing. I don't want to subscribe to another service. So, because I've got too many as it is. So, before I'll even think about even doing a trial of this Quibi thing, I mean, what is it that they have? And we've discussed it previously. Their big hook was, we've got 10-minute shorts from all these great creators. Okay. All right. That's not enough to make me want to try you know what I mean? It's just, that's not going to motivate me. That might motivate someone else. So the fact that they're losing money, I'm not shocked. How's that? That's a very long-winded way to say I'm not shocked.
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm interested in this short form. I've always kind of thought in my head, wouldn't it be nice to have a place for shorts, for short film, where you could actually market and monetize it? And Quibi could be that place, since they're getting people used to a shorter form of entertainment, of produced entertainment. And in that respect, Quibi would be interesting to me. But the problem is it's only meant for mobile viewing. They're not going to do a PlayStation 4 app. And as I've talked many times, I use the PlayStation 4 app to view most of my streaming content because I like to watch it on my big screen. I don't like to watch on this thing. I hate watching on this thing. I don't understand people that do. It strains my eyes. It's just not comfortable. It strains my neck. I understand the idea of being on a commute, or you're on a carpool and you do that, or you travel a lot and you do that. I get that. I do get that. But it's not the way that I like to ingest my entertainment. So I think that is one kind of fatal flaw, in my opinion, of Quibi, because I do think short form produced content, if we could develop a market for that, I'd be all for that. You know what I mean? Especially as an independent filmmaker, I'd be all for that if there was a market for it.
Well, see, my big thing is, for example, like right now, like when I go to watch a movie trailer on YouTube, for example, I end up having to watch like one or two commercials before basically I watch the commercial for the movie. Okay. it typically doesn't bother me that much. Okay. But when you're talking about a 10-minute short buffered, because, and I don't know if they do ad supported stuff or not, but I don't know. I'm a big believer in shorts too. It's not like I think less of shorts. It was just, at the end of the day, it doesn't have something to kind of, it just doesn't have anything to capture my attention. Like, for example, like if they were creating a bunch of interesting, groundbreaking, 10-minute shorts, and among those, they've brought on some of the new emerging minds in science fiction, and they're going to have a whole section dedicated to, new interpretations or new whatever in science fiction. You know what I mean? Oh, that sounds interesting. Or action adventure or anything. To just say we're going to create a bunch of 10-minute shorts with all these different people, it's like, okay. But sometimes actors and actresses and even comedians, they don't just do the same thing all the time. So just because you say you have so-and-so and they're creating some 10-minute short material for something, it's like, is it going to be funny? Is it going to be serious? Is it going to be action adventure? Is it going to be, genre style? Like what is it? That's the thing. It's like, that when it comes to Quibi, that's the only thing I remember. They're creating 10-minute shorts with these people. Okay. In this episode tonight, we're going to be talking about one of the most versatile, talented actors who actually started out doing stand-up comedy, but he didn't always do the same thing either. That's what I'm saying. It's just from a marketing standpoint, I don't understand what it is they offer the marketplace. It's different than anyone else. It's just they're also out there.
Well, I think they've done a terrible job marketing their shows because, for the most part, I don't know any of their shows. The only one that I'm aware of, and I only found out about it, I think, yesterday from a television ad, watching over-the-air broadcast TV. For those of you that don't know, I'm a big antenna guy. I use my antenna a ton. I watch Heroes and Icons, and I watch Comet free over the air all the time. And I think I just saw an ad for Reno 911. I was like, oh, that's going to be on Quibi. That's the first show that I've seen advertised for Quibi where I was like, oh, interesting. Because I see the ads all the time on Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, and I see ads from Quibi all the time on Twitter. And I'll look at the show that they're advertising, and I'm like, not interested. So I think that the message there, obviously, is that content is key. And we've been pretty consistent on this show talking about that. It's always going to be about the content. It's always going to be about the content. And it's got to be something that draws you in, regardless of whether it's 10 minutes long, 30 minutes long, or an hour long, whatever it is.
Yeah. And for me, that's kind of where, Quibi, whatever sits, in my mind, they don't occupy any kind of an interesting niche. So I'm not really concerned about what they're doing. They would have to come up with something, in order for me to be, oh, well, that's interesting, because eventually, I oftentimes, when it comes to certain things, I do occasionally go, okay, whatever, I'll try it, or I'll do this or whatever. We've seen an example of that at the beginning of this show when I bought those X-Men little Funko Pop guys. So I am able to be manipulated, you know what I mean? And see myself, parted from my money. But right now, they haven't given me any. Well, here you go. How about an 8-part, 10-minute reimagining of Buck Rogers? Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Now I'm down.
I like that.
Now I'm down.
I like that.
Gil Gerard's going to come back. Aaron Gray's going to come back. They're going to do, some sort of supporting roles. But they're going to totally reimagine, the original, the 80s, at least we think of the original, the 80s show, and whatever. It's like, okay, cool. Now I feel compelled to learn more about Quibi or Quibi. Now I actually care enough to learn how to pronounce the name correctly.
No, that's a great point. No, like I said, I think we've been consistent that content is key. And that's a good segue into the other article I have for Streaming Wars, as far as one place where we have been interested because of their content. We were even talking about earlier in one of the other articles, we were talking about Battlestar Galactica, which is going to be coming to Peacock. And Peacock has been a streaming service you and I think have been interested in from the start, simply because of the ad-based tier. I think you and I are both advocates of ad-based free entertainment. So this is a Deadline article, and it says Peacock sets Apple distribution deal ahead of July national launch. This article is dated May 6th. It says Peacock, the streaming service launched last month by NBC Universal for Comcast subscribers, has set a deal with Apple to be available across the tech giant's devices when it launches in July. The distribution partnership is the first one beyond Cox Communications to be announced by NBCU for the July 15th national rollout. So this is interesting. So what's happening is, and by the way, they touch on this as well. So Peacock is going to be available on Apple devices, which, in a lot of ways, you would think Apple might be trying to push people out of their devices and access to their devices because they're a competitor now with Apple TV. But with Apple Plus. And so Apple is going to take Peacock. And also this article talks about how basically cable, Cox Communications, is going to be offering Peacock, which I think is really interesting. So Peacock is really, I think, looking at kind of a unique model in terms of their distribution and looking kind of almost at all of the above approach. It says the distribution agreement covers the iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV for Peacock's national debut, which is going to be on July 15th. At this stage, it will have a free ad-supported tier with basically 7,500 hours of TV and movie content live and on demand. That's apparently at the free tier because we've been concerned about that, about what's going to be available on the free tier. Now, for $5 a month for non-Comcast customers, viewers can upgrade to the premium level, which will have 15,000 hours of programming. An additional $5 a month brings subscribers an ad-free version. So I think this is interesting on two levels. First of all, obviously the fact that Apple is doing this, that they're going to be allowing this competitor on their hardware, I think is really interesting. And then again, I kind of want to emphasize with these different tiers, will Battlestar Galactica be on that free tier? That's one thing I really want to know. What do you think about this, Dave?
My hope would be that this new Battlestar Galactica would be available on the free tier because it is something that guarantees to bring people back, But on the flip side, I currently pay for CBS All Access, because of the Star Trek content that's on there. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what they decide to do. NBC Universal has such amazing content. This is one of those ones where when this comes online, I'm going to be questioning, where can I cut a corner, where can I shave something to maybe look at, the additional hours of programming. I'm just curious. It'd be interesting for me. I'm curious to know not just where the new Battlestar Galactica falls, but where the classic Battlestar Galactica falls in this equation. Where does Knight Rider fall in this equation? Where does all this stuff because NBC
That's a great question. That's a great question.
What is in the free and then what is in, what's kind of behind the paywall? Because I think we're going to be surprised at the stuff that's behind the paywall versus the stuff that's available for free. Like I brought up before, my wife and I originally got a subscription to Hulu because I wanted to watch Space 1999. It wasn't because I wanted to watch all this other stuff. I literally started paying for Hulu for Space 1999. It isn't even on there anymore, but that was what motivated me, to look into it. The things I watch on Hulu, I don't watch a lot of the newer content. I'm currently making my way through Staying Elsewhere, for example. I mentioned it earlier. I've been slowly working my way through Hill Street Blues for quite some time. I've been rewatching Justified on Hulu. So I'm going to be interested to see what they consider to be the Come Have a Taste, it's free crack that's in the 7,500 that's on the pay side versus the stuff that's behind the paywall. I think we're going to be surprised at what is where, because I think these companies have enough data now to know what sometimes someone's willing to pay for and not willing to pay for. So that's what I'm most curious to learn.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, what do you think about the whole deal with Apple, that Apple is allowing allowing them on their platforms? Because my understanding is that's not the case with every one of these streaming platforms coming out. I think Apple is pushing some of them out, or at least initially was planning to. Do you think that's an indication that maybe Apple isn't as serious about the streaming wars as maybe some other people might think?
I don't know if it means they're not as serious. I just think it means that we are beginning to move to that day that we have discussed previously on the show, where eventually, these different services and some of this different content is going to be packaged in a way that's probably a little bit more similar to what we were used to when we were paying for cable.
Right.
Your basic package, but you can also get Stars and Skinamax and HBO for an extra amount, or you can get ESPN, or what I mean. Like I think this is just the early signs that we're going to be headed to that place eventually. Where these different services and stuff, they're going to take all this different stuff and they're going to pack. Like, for example, like if I could just pay for the sci-fi package, you know what I mean, and get a lot of this content that's controlled by all these different entities under one roof, I would be down for that.
I'm surprised that hasn't happened, because, like, for instance, Hulu's a good example. Hulu has like abridged versions of different channels. Like they have like some AMC content, for instance, but they don't have The Walking Dead, but they have Fear the Walking Dead. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Well, and it gets even stranger because, like, for example, like we've talked before about the weird state of Stargate, where basically MGM has it, they own it, but clearly they don't have the money to do anything with it, So it's just, at one point it was like its own little Stargate app, you know what I mean? And they were rolling out that one show to support it, I mean, they were, I don't know, because that's the thing. It's like that's the thing I always find surprising, and I've mentioned this before on the show. The things that we as fans want to see live on versus what the companies decide, well, we're done with that now. Because sometimes they don't match up. The companies are sometimes willing to throw away something that's incredibly valuable, incredibly lucrative, that they could still be doing a lot with, but they just go, I'm tired of working with this franchise. Just throw it away. Because sometimes I feel like that's really what happens. It's like there's no active Stargate production, so just put it on the shelf over there, But it's like when you think about all those different shows and all that content, you'd think one of these service providers would want it. So that's what I'm thinking. I just think it's the early signs that eventually these companies they're going to have to work together a little bit. Everybody just can't have their own individual channel. I mean, I don't think all brands are strong enough to support. Because if that was true,
well, we know what would be funny is Apple's in a unique position because Apple produces hardware and software, and now they're producing content. They're producing film, video content in addition to all that. There's not a whole lot of other people that do that. In fact, I can't think of another example off of the top of my head. Like it would be the equivalent of if like Roku decided to start their own studio and they decided to only use their studio on their platform, which of course would probably wipe out the platform. So it's kind of a fine line with Apple, because Apple obviously has Apple TV, a product where they want to say, hey, use this hub to get all your streaming content. But at the same time, they're also producing their own content. It's kind of interesting.
Well, and see, along those same lines, well, I'm trying to think of how to state this. I've noticed with some of the newer generations, there's not a commonality. Now, what I mean by commonality is a lot of us grew up watching a lot of the same things, you know, so that when I reference something, you know, like if I say "you big dummy," like some people will know I'm referencing Sanford and Son, and they'll understand what that's supposed to mean. Okay, um, you know, there just used to be for example, um, Gilligan's Island, like Hogan's Heroes is always a bit odd for me, but there were just like these shows that were in syndication that like there's just a whole bunch of us, we just grew up watching them. And our parents might have watched them when they were new and in first run. So there was a commonality. So when you talk about pop culture, when you talk about sort of those just shows that you watched growing up or whatever, there was a baseline, and everyone kind of knew similar things. You know, people were all familiar with I Love Lucy. People are familiar with Star Trek. People, you know what I mean? There was a commonality. Does that make sense?
Because James points out,
Yes,
because we only had 6 channels. Yep, there you
correct,
go.
correct. But
Yeah, that's not the world we're living in now. So
no, it's definitely not. And that's what I think is going to be weird, is to see the things that begin to emerge as these newer generations eventually get to the point where they can be the decision makers. I'm really curious what kind of stuff that they're going to want to create and see happen. Does that make sense? Because
yeah,
they
to me, I already have a term for this that I use all the time. It's a constant theme I put out on the show. I used it last week on my broadcast, since we didn't broadcast together. I did one on my own. I call it the violent, and I'm not going to pronounce it right. The violent vinylization of media. In other words, it's like vinyl records. So what happens is every market becomes more and more of a smaller market. So I use the analogy of the Tonight Show all the time too. It's like, there was the late night wars where everybody wanted to be the next Johnny Carson, and nobody realized the time of Johnny Carson had passed. That was gone. No one was ever going to be Johnny Carson ever again. He had that specific moment in time where he was it. He was it. Now we're seeing the same thing with all media. We're seeing like smaller markets for very specific shows that are going to appeal to very specific demographics. And that commonality, I think, for the most part, is going to be gone. I don't think that's going to exist, certainly not in the way it used to with, say, like things you said, like Gilligan's Island or something like that.
Well, and what I mean by that, just to make sure I drive the point home, is just the idea that when you reference certain things, whether deliberately for irony, whether unintentionally or whatever, because it was something that influenced you or whatever, there's a commonality. So you almost have sort of like a visual and sort of verbal and sort of like shorthand, so to speak. And you can throw out an idea, and if someone has the similar experiences, they go, "Ah, yes, I know exactly what you mean." So it kind of cuts to the chase quicker, because well, I'm just curious to see. I'm just curious to see where we're going to be. So as more of the some of the streaming wars content you've been talking about tonight, it just heightens that idea for me even more. Does that make sense? The idea that we're breaking things up into such small packaged, bits of content that it creates a different sort of, I think, like creation point in terms of the influence that it's having on these newer generations that are coming up. So I'm really curious to see what kind of things that come out from them, or what kind of things they find interesting or compelling, because it's so isolated from a lot of other kind of more general kind of content. Because I don't know if I'd chosen to, if I could choose to, or whatever. Some of the stuff I watched when I was growing up, I don't know if I would have been as interested in it, and if I could have chosen to only consume those things that I don't know. I'm getting on a tangent. I'm rambling. I need to stop. I'm sure you get the
Well,
understanding gist.
sort of along those lines, James mentions that he says, I'm going to out the new Amazon Prime show Upload. I've never heard of the show Upload, and I don't have Amazon Prime. Is something that you recommend that I watch? Because, like I said, I don't even have Amazon Prime. He also mentions Return of Man from Atlantis. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of either one of those shows, and I don't know anything about them. So I think that that's kind of, in many ways, that's kind of the way we're headed right now.
Well, so Return of the Man from Atlantis, that was actually a genre show that was actually out in the, I think it was mid to late 70s. And I remember Man from Atlantis. They had a comic book series. It was an interesting show. I know my mom used to like it. So there are definitely people, James, that are very familiar with for Man from Atlantis, kind of in the obviously in the show and in the chat. But it's interesting that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like I don't know. There's just I'm just gonna start rambling again. So I don't want to beat this topic to death. But no, what you were talking before, Eric, about how they're just kind of dividing up groups and dividing up groups and dividing up groups until you have these very sort of eclectic yet very focused sort of niche markets or niche audiences. As they move further away from each other, I always wonder, what kind of things will come from them. But then secondly, how they're going to shape the marketplace moving forward, because it's some very potentially unusual perspectives that can kind of grow within those microcosms. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where it takes things.
Yeah, I agree. All right, ready to get into, well, we do have one comment here. Manistan says, I remember Man from Atlantis starred Patrick Duffy, who later played Bob Ewing on Dallas. And I don't know. I haven't seen Man of Atlantis. Dave, can you comment on that? Is that correct?
No, that is correct. And I remember reading an article many, many years ago, Man of Sin, in Starlog, where someone felt like that, I guess Patrick Duffy at one time had been up for the role of Spider-Man. Of course, Nicholas Hammond was the one who got that role. And they this, I can't remember which article it was, but the person in the article in Starlog was talking about the fact that they felt like that part of the reason that Spider-Man didn't click better with people is because he personally felt like Patrick Duffy would have made a much better Peter Parker / Spider-Man than Nicholas Hammond did. So it's interesting. And of course, he went on to become, I think really more well known actually for, again, playing on Dallas. And on Dallas is one of those shows. It's like, it kind of has survived and been reinvented. Such a super popular show. But there's a lot of other shows from that same generation that or same era, whatever, that you don't really hear much about anymore. The whole Shot JR thing really seems to have caught on with people, and I think really carried that show further. And that's what I'm talking about. This is a wild. I can't remember when it was, but I was playing a game with some friends, and it was the heads up thing, the Ellen game where you put the phone to your head and you tip it down. And we were playing that, and someone actually described something as, like when they shot JR. Okay. Because everyone was of a certain age in the room, we all understood what we meant. But interchange one or two of those people with some people from the younger generation, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. So that's what I'm talking about. There used to be sort of this commonality because things would stay in syndication. Other generations and other groups would see them and experience them later. And it kept this certain sort of like sort of either visual or verbal sort of commonality or iconography or what do you want to call it. And I don't know. I'm starting to wax poetic again and go off on a tangent. But no, Patrick Duffy did play Bobby Ewing on Dallas. Such a long answer just to say yes.
Well, I think with that, we're ready to get into our next main topic.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so for tonight's retro review, our deep dive, we're going to be talking about The Fisher King. So The Fisher King, this is from 1991. It's considered a comedy / drama / fantasy. Of course, it starred Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges. A lot of other interesting people that were in this too. We're going to talk about as we get further into the actual episode. This was directed by Terry Gilliam. The summary here on IMDb says, a former radio DJ, suicidally despondent because of a terrible mistake he made, finds redemption in helping a deranged homeless man who was an unwitting victim of that same mistake. So when we do the retro reviews, typically what we do is we want to start off by talking about how we originally heard about the film. So tell me, Eric, how did you first hear about The Fisher King?
Well, I did actually see it in the movie theater when it originally came out. It came out a while ago, so my memory is a little bit muddy about exactly, because the way I remember it is I think I actually saw it at the Cheapies. We have a discount theater in town that will get films just as they leave their theatrical run and are getting ready to do their home media run. And they will show films basically at a discounted rate. It's like the old dollar theaters that some people might have grown up using. There's still one like that in my area, and there was when I was growing up, when I saw this film. And I believe that's where I saw it, was in that kind of a theater environment. But I did see it in the theater, and I remember what a strange film it was to me. And one of the things you really kind of hit the nail on the head about was this is kind of a genre-defying film. It is very much sort of a dramedy, however you want to pronounce that. It is a combination of comedy and drama. But again, as you mentioned, there is also very much a fantasy element to this film as well. Now, granted, that fantasy element can be explained away mostly by the fact that our main character, Robin Williams here, is mentally deranged. He's actually been traumatized. So in that sense, it's actually very topical because it deals with the idea of post-traumatic stress. But it really is a kind of not easily defined in terms of genre. And it's a very interesting film. And I just remember being kind of like, I don't know what I think about this when I first saw it, because I did see it in the theater. I'm not sure. I'm sure the reason I went to see it was because Robin Williams was in it. I imagine that's the only reason I went in. It wasn't because I was like, oh, well, it's just going to be kind of like, gosh, I don't even know what you would compare it to at the time. What fantasy film or what kind of film you would compare it to that was contemporary to it. But I probably went in just thinking, hey, I'm going to see a funny Robin Williams movie, and that's not exactly what this is. So it is kind of it doesn't really stick with any specific genre, in my opinion.
So the way that I first heard about The Fisher King, in all honesty, was I just remember seeing the poster. So if you see the image here that we have up for the show, this is kind of the format that we've been using for the retro reviews for the graphics I create for the show. But this poster, I remember seeing this poster very specifically. And from this, there's a little caption up there, and you can read the caption, but you're not exactly sure what you're getting based off this particular poster in terms of what you're going to see kind of in the movie itself.
That poster doesn't say anything about the movie, what the movie actually is.
Right. But this is how I first learned about the film. This is going to be interesting because usually when we talk about these films, I have a very specific connection to them normally in some form. This, of course, was suggested by one of our viewers, listeners, one of the important members of our Rogues Gallery. And this is a film that I don't have a lot of, I don't know, I don't have a lot of attachment to it, but I'll get into that here in just a moment. So when I originally saw The Fisher King, I did not see it in the movie theater because it just didn't seem compelling to me at the time. I don't really remember seeing the trailers for it at all. And when I did actually finally see it the first time, I saw it at home. It was I think it might have even been DVD when I saw it. Yeah, I think it was DVD. And it was in the midst of a bunch of other stuff that we were watching that night. And I don't think in all honesty, even really properly paid attention to it. And it was just because it was all over the place. I remembered having that feeling that it was kind of jumbled the first time I saw it. But it didn't really make much of an impression. But I think it's because, in a weird way, because of what was going on that night, I didn't really pay much attention to it. I didn't really focus on it. So it's not a film that I had any negative association with it. I just don't have a lot of association with it at all. So this is going to be an interesting retrospective for me. So you talked about how you first heard about it, Eric, and some of your initial impressions when you first saw it. As a part of the retrospective format, what we do is we also discuss how we feel about the film today. So tell me, Eric, having recently revisited The Fisher King, how do you feel about the film today?
Well, I liked it when I first saw it. I should have probably made that clear, even though it was a little bit disjarring to me. I do remember liking it, but I haven't watched the film since then. That kind of tells you something as far as, I thought it was kind of weird. But I will say, seeing it again, it's a really fascinating film to me. I mean, the cinematography is beautiful. It's a very, very well filmed. I mean, this is almost like an art film. It's filmed so well, in my opinion. Robin Williams' performance is absolutely crazy, which is what you would expect from Robin Williams. Amanda Sand has a good comment here that he mentions The Fisher King seems to be about when Robin Williams began to transition beyond comedy and into more dramatic roles, showing his broader talents. Tom Hanks has also made that transition. And I agree with you, Amanda Sand. That's kind of how I remember it as well. It's like this was kind of a turning point for Robin Williams' career. And you can really see it in the film now with that sort of 2020 hindsight, because yes, he's incredibly Robin Williams in this film. And by that, I mean, he's zany, he's kooky, he's insane. He's literally insane. And the thing is that it's also, it's got that sort of funny, kooky element, but then there's also an incredibly tragic, an incredibly heartfelt element to this as well, where there were moments when I was watching this where I was tearing up. And I pretty much knew it was coming. It'd been a while since I'd seen the movie, but there are some really tough moments. There's an element about a mass shooting in this film, which is very topical to today. There's all sorts of elements like that. So it's kind of interesting to watch, in the perspective of the here and now, because in so many ways, it's extremely topical because it deals with issues of post-traumatic stress. It deals with issues of mass shootings. It deals with all sorts of different, issues of homelessness, mental illness, all those kinds of things that are still so topical today. And a really interesting performance by Robin Williams. What was your impression, Dave? Especially, it's interesting how you told me that you have no real attachment to it, in the past, that you really weren't into it when you first saw it, or it just kind of passed you by. How do you feel about it now?
Well, I was kind of awestruck by how well crafted the film is to begin with. Because like I said, it didn't really make much of an impression when I originally saw it. But again, like I said, I can tell you right now, having just recently rewatched it for the show, I clearly wasn't paying attention. it is an incredibly well crafted film. It is an amazingly topical film right now for a film actually having been made, in the 90s with a sort of Howard Stern kind of personality. I feel like the time of Howard Stern, is kind of sort of past, at least the super electric, like it persona that he had at one point. I feel like that's kind of diminished. So in a weird way, that part of this,
But
while
I'll mention
relevant,
this. I just want to mention this, Dave. It is interesting, though, that we're still talking about the effect that the media has on mass shootings, right? We still
yeah,
talk about that today.
yeah. And so it's interesting how that kind of persona is supposed to be the Jeff Bridges character. I think is supposed to be a big hook for people to get them into the story, and it's interesting. But in a weird way, I feel like we're so far removed from that kind of personality because radio has diminished to an extent that it comes off a little weird at first. But the performances in this too are top notch all across the board. Whether you want to talk about Jeff Bridges, Robin Williams is pretty much wonderful in everything I've ever seen him in, but he's very good in this. Mercedes Rule is really great in this. Like everyone is really great in this. And I was amazed at how sucked into the story I was. I was amazed at how moved I was at times. I feel like I clicked more with the dramatic ideas and the concepts being explored more so than the comedy. The fantasy elements to me work best when they service the psychoses of the particular characters. There's a scene where, spoiler alert, because we're going to talk about this in a spoiler manner. So again, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen The Fisher King. There's a moment in the film where Jeff Bridges' character goes to retrieve this item, and when he goes there to retrieve it, that whole thing was absolutely ludicrous. I found that because the film does such a great job of bringing you along. That was the moment that took me out of the film. But with the exception of that particular scene, this film is one of the. I'm shocked that I don't talk to people about this movie. I'm surprised that this film didn't have a bigger impact on me when it originally came out. I just was completely blown away by what a great film this is. And when it was originally suggested, I thought, yeah, sure, we'll do The Fisher King, but it's such a great film. That's the thing that amazed me the most. This is a really, really great film. And especially when you look at what we had watched before. I mean, we're going from The Gifted to Fisher King. I mean, these are two completely different things, number one. But the quality and the craftsmanship and everything that's going into it, whether you want to talk about the performances or the writing, whether you want to talk about, the literary, notations or connotations of the underpinnings of the story. It's just the whole thing was just absolutely it's just a great film. That's the thing that shocks me the most is what a great film that this is. And how in a weird way, how there's so much topical content to this film. Having been made in the 90s, it still has a lot of very topical things to discuss. I
wanted to stop you for a second because one thing that I thought was interesting was that you talked about how different it is from what we reviewed earlier, The Gifted. But what I think is interesting is, again, I would emphasize that I feel like this is a very difficult film to define as far as genre. Don't you think you could argue that Robin Williams' character is kind of a superhero?
Yes, he's very much a superhero. He went through especially because let me bring this closer. For those that are comics fans, you'll diehard comics fans, you'll get this. For some of you in the audience, you may not. But Kevin Smith reinvented or attempted to reintroduce Green Arrow to the comic book reading public at one point. And Green Arrow, the original Green Arrow, Oliver Queen had died, and his son had basically taken over for a period of time, and he was the new Green Arrow. So Kevin Smith came on and did a really great series with Phil Hester and Matt Wagner, and they kind of reintroduced the Oliver Queen, the classic Green Arrow, back into the DC universe. And the first time you see him, he looks like a crazy homeless man, and he's got a makeshift arrow that he's put together out of something, and he's accosting these two rough, sort of rough, thuggish type characters. That's the way you get reintroduced to Oliver Queen when he's brought back into the DC universe in the Kevin Smith series. And I couldn't help but think about that when I saw the introduction of Robin Williams in this, because he's doing the same exact thing. Like, it's the same thing. So I'm pretty sure that's what Kevin Smith was inspired by when he came up with that idea. At least I think
inspired by.
Well, no, I mean, you take in influences from all different kinds of things. The things that makes it unique is what you do with it. You know what I mean? But I couldn't help but think about that. But yeah, he is very much sort of like a superhero character, especially when he's initially introduced. But
he even has a lair. He even has like his own little weird headquarters and a lair.
He's got gadgets, an outfit, a uniform. He's got exactly. But
James saved me. James saved me. It's loosely inspired.
Yes,
like loosely
inspired. Yeah. But the thing I was most shocked about, revisiting it here for the show, is what a wonderful, interesting film this is. I almost felt kind of ashamed, the fact that it didn't have more of an impression with me, because I remember being confused by it. And being a little bit too dismissive the first time I saw it. And I think it's because I was distracted and wasn't paying attention. But man, there's these really awesome sequences they do with the Red Knight where it's spitting the fire. And I mean, it's just this is if you've never seen this film, I highly, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I love the Arthurian legend, and I remember there was some connections to the Arthurian legend from this movie, but I didn't realize just how much of a deep dive it was. But man, what an incredible film! What an incredible film! So that's my thoughts on the film today. I mean, I was just blown away by how good it is, and like I said, I felt kind of bad that, and it's not that I've been dismissive of the film. I just didn't think necessarily it was worth revisiting or rewatching. And that's the thing I'm most shocked at, is it's definitely worth rewatching. It's definitely worth revisiting. And I feel like that, on my, because I have a bunch of, I still collect physical media, so I still have a lot of DVDs and Blu-rays and such on and so forth. And I really feel like this needs to be on the shelf with my Robin Williams films. It needs to be on that shelf sitting there next to, Dead Poets Society. You know what I mean? I was really amazed at how good this movie was.
Dead Poets Society is one of my favorite films. I relate to it in so many ways because I went to an all-boys high school, and I relate to it in all sorts of ways personally. And I think it's definitely up there with Dead Poets Society. I think there's no doubt about that. And James does mention, you're both welcome, because it was his suggestion that we watch this film. And thank you, because we appreciate that. We appreciate people reaching out and asking us to check things out or review things. So we appreciate that quite a bit.
And then Man of Sand has a comment here too. He says the 2007 film the Adam Sandler movie Reign Over Me had some similar elements. Also, the more recent Joker movie starring River Wax's Joaquin Phoenix makes him almost like a dark anti-hero rather than just a supervillain. Yes, most definitely. It looks at it looks at the Joker as more of a dark anti-hero than necessarily a quote-unquote super villain.
I like this connection, Manisan, because I hadn't even thought about this. This is really interesting because Dave and I are both fans of the Joker film, and I didn't make that connection at all. But you're right, especially with the mental illness. There is a similarity between these two characters. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I did reflect on that just a little bit when I was watching the film. Is that because it's a very interesting look at mental illness and the ways in which our minds sometimes can run away with us, or sometimes lead us down a path that normally we wouldn't choose. And
that reminds me, Dave. Dave, before we forget, because we said we would mention it, Hugh is in this. And, and you talking about this, just it's the scene with him in it. Is pretty interesting because the entire premise of that scene is basically that his character is some sort of an executive for a studio, and he's pitching a zany, quirky show about homelessness. And he wanted to show the plight of the homeless basically by making a situation comedy about them. So I thought was pretty interesting.
And it was weird too, because in the quote unquote sitcom, they wanted to portray homelessness as a choice, and that it could be deemed sort of like, a way to channel your freedom. This film was so topical right now, it's not even funny. And that was the thing I was also kind of most shaken by as I was watching it, is just thinking about how topical the film kind of is in a lot of different ways. But man, yeah. John Delancey, of course, played Q. He shows up, and he's a television executive, and he's got this great idea that he's pitching them. He's pitching Jeff Bridges' character. And his agent, which is actually his agent is actually Frasier's brother from Frasier. I can't remember the actor's name. It was when he was pitching, I was like, wow, that's such a horrible thing. And this is a great cast.
Actually, what's funny is that's the moment that brings back Jeff Bridges' character, because at that point he's decided to turn his back on Robin Williams and all of his friends. He's basically decided to turn his back on that life. He's turned his back on his girlfriend and got some new hot young girlfriend, and he's going back up, and that's the moment when he realizes, I've gone too far. I've gone too far in this pitch from this a-hole. You know what I mean? Now I've gone too far. I like that. I thought that was good because, there are a lot of evil producers out there. I might even be one of them. I might even be one of them. So.
Well, they talk about one of the things that's brought up is that yes, and James brings up that it's David Hyde Pierce who actually plays his agent, which ironically he looked an awful lot like the guy who had the shotgun who did the mass shooting too, which I thought was a weird parallel, to the point that I almost wonder if that was intentional.
That's an interesting catch because I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. There is a visual similarity. And that particular actor, I've seen him. He's a character actor. He's in a lot of stuff, but I don't know his name either. The man who plays the gunman. Yeah. But they're so similar. It almost made me wonder along the lines of like, are they saying that in a weird way, like his career, his choices are, sort of destroying him in a manner of speaking. And then when his agent takes him into that horrible meeting, it even reinforces that concept even further, because that personality only shows up, it seems like, at these weird pivotal moments, and then the things that come out of them are defining. You know what I mean? It's just kind of weird kind of a thing that I did kind of notice, because they look so similar. I'm like, I think that's intentional. I think we're supposed to draw a conclusion from this.
because that's the thing that's really great about this film is that it is so well crafted and it's so intentional in its choices at times, which is interesting too, because Robin Williams is known mostly for his ability to kind of be in the moment and sort of like improvise. And so it's hard to imagine trying to create such a sort of a focused, intentional, driven, narrative with someone who's known to sort of in the moment, just in a very somewhat sometimes chaotic manner. You know what I mean? Kind of spiral out of control. It works for the character, but at the same point, I could see where shooting it like every once in a while, you could find yourselves in it and an unfortunate sort of moment in terms of the narrative. But again, that goes back to reinforce what an incredibly talented actor and a professional Robin Williams was too. The fact that he's able to do that, but not take it so far off the wheels that the narrative is still moving forward in the manner in which it needs to. So that's the thing. I was just amazed. Like I said, there was just one moment that took me out of the film, because up until that moment, everything that was that fantastical, you could attribute to someone's psychoses as for why it was occurring. So at that point in the film, when that particular moment occurs, I found it to be a bit, like I said, just a little bit off-putting. It took me out of the film just a little bit, just because I was like going, wait a minute, this is happening for real? Like, because when I thought he would go to try to retrieve this particular object that they need to help one of the characters out, I thought he would just show up at the guy's door and be like, hey, look, can I borrow this thing? Like I thought he was going to use a celebrity, status, you know what I mean, to acquire the object. Does that make sense?
But what fun would that be? What fun would that be?
I agree. I agree.
I mean, seriously, because it's interesting to me because what you're saying, I totally understand. There is a sort of fantastical element to what Jeff Bridges' character does to achieve Robin Williams' goal. But in the end, of course, what he does essentially heals them both. And this is, of course, supposed to be some sort of analogy to the Fisher King story and the idea that this item heals them, right? So I think my thought is that obviously film is a visual medium, and they wanted to show that they wanted to have this sort of concrete action that we could see that was going to heal the two of them. And they had to do it in a visual manner, and they had to show it because that's what films are supposed to do. That's my thought on it.
Well, like I said, it was that was it, and it doesn't ruin them. It didn't ruin the movie for me at all. It just kind of took me out of the film a little bit. But like I said, other than that, and that's kind of a bit of a nitpick, to be honest. This is incredibly well crafted and made film, and like I said, I felt kind of ashamed. I mean, that when it was initially recommended, I was kind of going, yeah, whatever, sure, we'll do that. But in hindsight, such an interesting and wonderful film. So I myself, I cannot recommend someone take the time to revisit The Fisher King enough, because and two, it was it's an original story. You know what I mean? It's just everything about it. It's so terribly interesting. So tell me, Eric, would you recommend that people check out The Fisher King?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I will say that it's something that you should prepare yourself for a little bit. As Dave mentioned from his own experience, this is not a film that you watch casually. Get your adult beverage ready, get your snacks ready, make sure that you're not, going to be distracted, and really watch the movie and process it, because this is one of those kinds of movies that really deserves your full attention if you're going to even try to understand it or enjoy it. It's not mindless entertainment.
That's very true. Definitely not that. So I want to definitely thank James for the recommendation. This is a very interesting and tremendous film for us to review, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, So with that, Eric, are we probably good to move to the outro?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, very cool. All right, so I want to thank you, hopefully, for watching or listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I've been one of your hosts for nearly the last 30 years. Well, I'm getting a little bit off track because I'm a little tired. But you can see more of my artwork. You can learn more about me, as well as find the sign up for the email newsletter at my website. That's at davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeaty.com. And I am going to push that sign up back up to the top of the page on the latest news or the news page. That should hopefully be available for people to check out tomorrow. But definitely encourage people, go to the website, see what we've got. You can check out some of my artwork, that kind of stuff, whatever, and learn more about me. So I want to thank Eric Alexander, my co-host, for being here, obviously back on the show. So tell Eric, please tell the folks at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most active on Twitter, so that's usually the easiest place to get a hold of me. My DMs are open, and that's at BASSGOD14. That's BaseGod14. And I do want to mention that this particular segment was done because one of our viewers suggested that we do a retrospective on this film. So please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Dave. Give us suggestions. The moral of this story is you got to listen to your viewers. You got to listen to your listeners, and that makes for a better show. So if anybody has any suggestions, again, you can reach me on Twitter at BASSGOD14. That's also my YouTube. It's also our Twitch for any of you that are using Twitch or seeing us on Twitch, hopefully, as we try to get that platform going. So I hope everybody stays safe out there. And Man of Sand says, thanks a lot for another great show, gentlemen. Hope to see more of your good content continue into the future. And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.